Chapter 1592. As Xiangyang walked out of Thunder Flash Hall, Xiaohua heard the whole story clearly. It turned out that the entire Imperial Thunder sect was not a peaceful and harmonious big family like Xiaohua imagined. Just as Xiangyang had said before, not only were there rogue cultivators, cultivator families, and disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect, but there were also grudges between these disciples of different identities. Therefore, in order to settle these grudges, Imperial Thunder sect had a special rule. That was, no one was allowed to fight outside the Thunder Arena, especially if it was life-threatening. As long as it was discovered, both sides would be severely punished. On the Thunder Arena, both sides' life and death were determined by the heavens. No matter if it was the 8 great Thunder Palaces or the sect master and elders, none of them would interfere. Of course, it was not easy to enter the Thunder Arena. Both sides had to agree and sign a life and death contract. The masters of both sides had to know and report to Heavenly Thunder Palace. Imperial Thunder sect's action was naturally to minimize the internal friction between the disciples of Imperial Thunder sect. But just as Xue Minghui said, where there were people, there would be fighting. The Thunder Arena of Imperial Thunder sect was never idle. Every once in a while, there would be disciples of different cultivation levels who would lose their lives on it. As for Thunder Ridge, it was the same as Myriad Thunder Valley, a place in Imperial Thunder sect's Thunder Mountain range. However, this place was where Imperial Thunder sect's Thunder Palace refined their weapons. In Imperial Thunder sect, weapon refiners and alchemists were rare. Their status was higher than ordinary cultivators of the same cultivation level. Thunder Ridge was the main force of Thunder Palace's weapon refinement, so its status in Thunder Palace was much higher than Myriad Thunder Valley. Naturally, there were many disciples in Swallow Thunder Ridge. Although Zhenqikue's master, Zhenjie, was an early gold core stage cultivator, Zhenjie had many martial brothers. There were quite a few early and middle gold core stage cultivators. Not to mention Zhenjie's master and martial uncle, they were all close to nascent soul stage. Maybe one day they would successfully conceive a nascent soul and become a cultivator of Imperial Thunder sect who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Thunder Meng Daoist. Because of this, Thunder Meng Daoist often turned a blind eye to Thunder Ridge and did not interfere too much. In addition, Lei Meng Daoist was not a disciple of Imperial Thunder sect, which was somewhat different from Swallow Thunder Ridge. Therefore, some of Lei Meng Daoist's traits had resulted in Swallow Thunder Ridge being arrogant and domineering. After listening to this, Xiaohua understood in his heart that this Zhenqikue should be the same as the Yan family's Yan Wei, conceited and arrogant. He couldn't bear to see others stronger than him. Moreover, he had snatched away his right to participate in the Feather Immortal Conference. So, he was afraid that this matter would not be settled peacefully. At worst, I won't go to the Thunder Arena. Xiangyang forced a smile and said, in the past, a disciple of Swallow Thunder Ridge had a grudge with me and wanted to fight me to the death. I don't care about him at all. He can't do anything about it. Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. His eldest senior brother was an honest person who never caused trouble. How could he have offended other disciples? Thus, he smiled and said, so. Eldest senior brother has also spoiled other people's plans. He, of course. Xiangyang looked into the distance. Who doesn't have exciting moments? Back then, when I married your senior sister-in-law into the Myriad Thunder Valley, I also made many people sad. Haha, Xiaohua clapped and said, that's how it should be. Xiangyang's face became somewhat spirited. He comforted him and said, don't say that you participated in the selection of the Feather Immortal Conference because someone instructed you to do so. Even if you participated yourself and snatched away that guy's right, what reason would he have to ask you to go to the Thunder Arena? Besides, if it really doesn't work out, you just have to agree. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't speak, Xiangyang added, If it still doesn't work out, you can find Grandmaster Lei Meng or the sect leader. Hee, don't worry, eldest senior brother. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, that guy was already scared by me. Just now, he was just a fox pretending to be a tiger. If I really let him go to the Thunder Arena, he will definitely be scared out of his wits. Eldest senior brother, don't worry about me. Then, Xiaohua bid farewell to Xiangyang and flew back to the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden under Xiangyang's concerned gaze. After parting ways with Xiangyang, Xiaohua was very careful. Along the way, not only did he release his divine sense, but he also released his Buddhist sense to the maximum. He was afraid that Swallow Thunder Ridge's disciples would ambush him on the way. Fortunately, although he did meet a few disciples along the way, they were all unrelated. After saluting each other, they left. As soon as he returned to the Eastern Ridge, Xiaohua immediately opened the magic formation. Only after the magic formation closed did he feel at ease. He knew very well that if Shen Qikue wanted to make trouble for him, he wouldn't do it himself. Not to mention Zhen Weixing, even the other Foundation establishment disciples of Swallow Thunder Ridge could make a move and kill him without anyone knowing. What he said to Xiangyang before was not so much to comfort Xiangyang, but to give himself courage from the bottom of his heart. Damn it, if I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have won a single match and lost to them all. Xiaohua sits on a chair in the Immortal's Cave, secretly regretting, but how would I know that other than that disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace whose name I don't know, Zhen Qikue, this guy, was also arranged by someone else. Besides, if I didn't participate in this election, I wouldn't have the qualifications to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. How would I have obtained so many benefits? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and patted his hand. He took out the small bucket and the set of 9 sword pills from his storage pouch. With a wave of his hand, the 9 sword pills floated in front of his eyes. The more he looked at them, the more delighted he became. If I can obtain the cultivation method of the sword pills, I can also use my sword to move unhindered in the world. Wouldn't that be great? Xiaohua thought. He didn't seem to make any movements, but a pair of huge black hammers suddenly appeared under his feet. Xiaohua stood up and kicked the hammers with his feet. The hammers didn't move in the slightest. Then, he bent down and used his hand to pick up the hammers. He tested their weight and said with a smile, "These hammers are really not ordinary heavy. If they were a bit heavier, I'm afraid it wouldn't be so easy to send them into the space. My actions will be discovered by Martial Uncle Zhenming." Soon after, he used 70% of his strength with one arm. With a whoosh, the devil hammer of unknown material was actually lifted up by him. Unfortunately, just as he lifted it halfway, Xiaohua let out a cry of surprise, "Ouch!" Immediately after, Xiaohua actually used all of his strength to lift the devil hammer above his head. Ha ha ha! Xiaohua put down the devil hammer. He was extremely happy and said to himself, "I have to use all of my strength to hold it. If I use it to smash someone, what would be the effect? I'm afraid it would be even more powerful than the tip of the devil spear. With this sword pill and this devil hammer, I should participate in this election." Xiaohua waved his hand and sent the devil hammer and the sword pill into the space. He thought to himself, "I am a loose cultivator. What kind of situation have I not seen? You're just a second-generation ancestor of Swallow Thunder Ridge. Use whatever methods you have. If I don't kill you, I'm not surnamed Xiao." Soon after, Xiaohua's gaze landed on the small bucket. He seemed to have forgotten that his surname wasn't Xiao in the first place. That small bucket didn't hold the sword pill and looked even more tattered. Apart from a missing corner, there was a small hole at the bottom of the bucket. It couldn't even hold water. Xiaohua waved his hand and the small bucket flew into the air. It flipped left and right up and down. Xiaohua released his divine sense and discovered that there were faint fluctuations of spiritual power on this small bucket. However, it was extremely weak. If this small bucket was very light, Xiaohua would almost think it was a devil tool. Which magic treasure's fragment is this? Xiaohua thought and tried several magic treasure refining methods that he knew. Unfortunately, when he hit it with his spells, that small bucket didn't have any reaction. It really is a magic treasure. So arrogant. Xiaohua mocked himself. He waved his hand and was just about to put it into the space when he suddenly thought of something. He thought to himself, Lu Chongqi's black iron needle refining method mentioned the use of blood. This method is a type of blood sacrifice for magic treasures. Should I try it? But immediately after, Xiaohua hesitated again. Master said that although the blood sacrifice can refine magic weapons, that's only the method of recognizing a master after the magic weapon has been refined. It's only the final step. The requirement for the user's cultivation is quite high. Right now, I'm only at the chi refinement stage. How can I dare to use it? Although this small bucket is a magic treasure fragment, I'm afraid it can also suck my magic power dry. Thinking, Xiaohua dispelled this idea. He waved his hand and put the small bucket into the space. But faintly, Xiaohua felt that he had missed something. He frowned and thought for a long time. When he came to the pill room and cleaned up the soul-gathering pill, he warmed the pill furnace again. He looked at the three-legged vermilion bird and phoenix pattern furnace on the Samadhi true fire. His eyes suddenly lit up and he slapped his forehead. I was stupid. It's true that the small bucket can't be refined, but what about the sword pill? The sword pill is nurtured in the Dantian by sword cultivators since they were young. How can a sword cultivator's cultivation level be high? Moreover, if the sword pill doesn't recognize its master, how can it be put into the Dantian? Thinking about it made Xiaohua's heart warm, but reason stopped him. This is only my own guess. If it's not like this, wouldn't the sword pill be destroyed? Moreover, if it affects my cultivation, the losses outweigh the gains. Forget it, forget it. I'd better concentrate on refining pills. Xiaohua calmed his mind and concentrated on refining pills, putting the matter of the sword pill aside. Time passed extremely quickly. 10 months passed in the blink of an eye as Xiaohua refined pills, consumed pills, refined pills and familiarized himself with magic tools. During this time, no one came to the eastern mountain range to cause trouble. There were also no messages or disturbances from the myriad Thunder Valley. Xiaohua's cultivation level also steadily increased under the cultivation of the soul-gathering pill. Although he didn't reach the middle stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm, he still consolidated the early stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm. Everything developed according to Xiaohua's progress as an outstanding disciple. On this day, Xiaohua was practicing the fire crow net. He waved his hand and a net of fire as thin as silk flew into the air. His divine sense swept over a nearby boulder that was the size of a crouching ox. Xiaohua pointed his finger and the fire net suddenly enlarged, landing on the crouching ox boulder. Clap clap. Xiaohua clapped his hand and a flock of fiery red crows the size of a palm flew out from various parts of the fire net. The fiery red of the crows was mixed with a trace of purple, looking very gorgeous. Chapter 1593. The fire crows flew towards the boulder and entered it. After a while, Xiaohua pointed his finger and the fire crow net flew back into his hand. Looking again, the boulder had already turned into ashes. Wonderful. Xiaohua clapped his hands and smiled. I had an idea and refined the Samadhi true fire into the fire crow net. The power of the fire crows increased by 50%. Then, with a wave of his hand, he took out several top-quality fire attribute spirit stones. He grabbed a few already dim spirit stones from the fire net and replaced them. He said with some heartache, "Unfortunately, the power increased, but the consumption of spirit stones is also obvious. If I didn't have a lot of fire attribute spirit stones here, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to use it." At this moment, the token in Xiao Hua's bosom moved. Xiao Hua took out the token and pointed his finger. The array opened and a red message talisman flew into Xiao Hua's hand. "Oh, Master is here." Xiao Hua was shocked. He quickly extinguished the earth fire and put the pill furnace into his space. Looking around, there was nothing strange. He quickly flew out of the array. Sure enough, outside the array, not only Wu Qi, even Zhuo Minghui, Xiang Yang, and Yan Qinglian were standing in the air with a smile. And only Wu Qi's face was as calm as water, no expression could be seen. Master's wife." Xiao Hua greeted in surprise. He, Xiao Hua, I haven't seen you for a few days and your cultivation has indeed increased." Yan Qinglian helped Xiao Hua up and said with a smile. Seeing Xiao Hua's cultivation progress, Wu Qi's expression also eased. He snorted and said, "What is this? Only foundation building is true progress. Eldest senior brother, senior sister." Xiao Hua greeted Xiang Yang and the others. "Let's go, take Master in to see." Wu Qi waited for Xiao Hua to finish greeting and said indifferently, "Yes, Master's wife, please." Xiao Hua opened the array and invited the four to enter. Wu Qi looked around and shook his head. Aside from the abundant fire attribute spirit energy here, the rest of the world's spirit energy is lacking. It seems like a good place for disciples with fire attribute physiques to cultivate, but this fire attribute spirit energy feels extremely violent and difficult to refine into true essence. Even if you forcibly refine it, the true essence will inevitably be difficult to control. It's not good for stabilizing the realm and strengthening the foundation. This is not a place for you to cultivate after you build your foundation. Xiao Hua smiled wryly. "All right, Master understands. Disciple naturally won't stay here for long. Later, when I build my foundation, I'll find a place next to Master's Immortal's Cave to set up a residence so that I can often receive Master's teachings." Helpless, he unhappily rolled his eyes at Xiao Hua. "You just don't make your master angry." No. Xiao Hua didn't expect that helplessness would actually say this, and promptly smiled apologetically. Disciple is still waiting for Master to give pointers to disciple to step into the late stage of foundation establishment. Bullshit. He scolded helplessly. Xiao Hua was stunned. He scratched his head, not knowing what he did wrong. Helplessness looked at Xiang Yang and said, "Xiang Yang's son is a spirit-severing cultivator. How can you only reach the late stage of foundation establishment? You're at least a tribulation-transcending cultivator." Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian blushed. Zhuo Minghui covered her mouth and scolded, "You old bastard, you guessed that he's in the late stage of the foundation-building realm and you want your disciple to go through the tribulation." But as soon as the words left his mouth, he suddenly felt that it was inappropriate. Wasn't he insinuating that Xiang Yang? He promptly turned his head and said, "Qinglian, Master's wife wasn't talking about you." Ha ha ha. Xiao Hua couldn't help but laugh until he bent over. Helplessness also laughed loudly when he saw Xiao Hua laughing. His previous seriousness had long disappeared. Only Zhuo Minghui punched Helplessness a few times with her fists, and her face was bright red again. "Master, what business do you have here?" Xiao Hua and the others finished laughing and asked respectfully. Helplessness was happy and said, "What business could there be? You're one of the 2 disciples of my thunder-shocking palace participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly. I've come to invite you." Xiao Hua was stunned, so fast. Of course, he had been concentrating on alchemy and cultivation. He felt that only a few days had passed, but counting with his fingers, several months had already passed. Cultivation knows no time. Xiaohua sighed with emotion again. Are you ready? Helplessness saw that Xiaohua was in a daze and was unhappy in his heart, so he urged. Disciple is already ready. Xiaohua promptly nodded. Is that so? Why didn't I see you go to Thunder Bright Hall to exchange for yellow talismans? I also didn't see you go to receive the offerings. Helplessness asked back. Oh, of course. Xiaohua slapped his forehead when he heard this. He vaguely heard Xiang Yang mention that there was a place to exchange for yellow talismans and spirit stones in the Thunder Shocking Palace. If the disciples of Thunder Shocking Palace needed them, they could exchange for them with their own offerings. As for his own offerings, to be honest, he really didn't want to waste a day for those spirit stones and pills. Master's wife gave me some pills last time, and disciple also exchanged for some pills last time, so I didn't go to receive this year's offerings. Moreover, disciple feels that it's delaying cultivation, so I can just receive it once a year, right? Xiaohua promptly said. I know you have some in stock, but you should also prepare some yellow talismans and the like. They'll be useful in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Helplessness said unhappily. Yes, disciple understands. I'll exchange for them when I go to the Thunder Shocking Palace. Xiaohua's head was covered in sweat as he hurriedly said. When you go, everything will be too late. Helplessness waved his hand and said, Your eldest senior brother has already prepared them for you. Thank you for your trouble, eldest senior brother. Xiaohua's heart was warm as he took the storage pouch that Xiang Yang handed over. He opened it and took a look. There were some spirit stones, some pills, and a pile of yellow talismans. Among them, most of them were high-grade fireball talismans. At the 12th level of Qi refining, one has divine sense. However, divine sense has just been born and is still very weak. It can't be used for long periods of time. These yellow talismans are still very useful in the competition. Xiang Yang explained, I've also conveniently received your offerings. You don't have to run anymore. Eldest senior brother. Thank you. Xiaohua looked at Xiang Yang and saw that there were a lot more spirit stones and pills in the storage pouch. He knew that the yellow talismans were all exchanged by Xiang Yang himself. He felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. Really? Xiang Yang wanted to be his eldest senior brother more than Gong Mingwei. He even felt that he was his nephew. We have a lot of offerings, there's no need for them. Xiang Yang waved his hand. Many of them are from Master and Master's wife. You don't have to thank me. Xue Minghui smiled and said, You silly child. You are all disciples of Myriad Thunder Valley. It's normal for you to be intimate with each other. There's no need to thank me. Yes. Disciple understands. Xiaohua smiled and turned to ask Xiang Yang, what does eldest senior brother need? Me? Xiang Yang was stunned and shook his head. I don't need anything. I only hope that youngest junior brother can build his foundation as soon as possible and bring glory to my Myriad Thunder Valley. Xiaohua said with a bitter face, eldest senior brother, although master is next to me, you don't have to remind me. Can't you also give me a chance? Xiang Yang quickly waved his hand and said, if youngest junior brother has the heart, you should ask master. He's about to condense his core. I'm afraid he needs some things. Congratulations, master. Xiaohua beamed with joy and cupped his hands. What can this disciple do for master? I want dry distance pills. Do you have any? Xiang Yang helplessly glared at Xiaohua and said, you should worry more about yourself. At this time, Xiaohua obviously knew what dry distance pills were. Dry distance pills were medicinal pills that foundation-building cultivators took when they condensed their core. They were exactly the same as foundation-building pills for aura-refining cultivators. Xiaohua didn't have such things. He could only smile apologetically and said, "Master, you're asking for too much." "Hee, don't mind your master," Xue Minghui said with a smile as if she was protecting her nephew. "When he condenses his core, the school will naturally give him dry distance pills. I'm just afraid that he won't be able to condense his core, so there's no reason to ask the school for them. I'll help you condense your core tomorrow," Xiang Yang helplessly said. Xue Minghui also ignored him. She glanced at Xiang Yang and said in a low voice, "On the contrary, your eldest senior brother, if you have the chance, you can find." However, without waiting for Xue Minghui to say anything, Xiang Yang immediately interrupted, "Thank you for worrying about this disciple, but youngest junior brother is only an aura-refining disciple. How can he find that thing? It's better not to tell youngest junior brother. There's no reason for him to worry about it." Xue Minghui smiled bitterly and didn't say anything else. It seemed that that thing was really hard to find. Even if they were late-stage foundation-building cultivators, they didn't have any certainty of finding it. Just when Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued, Yan Qinglian considerately said from the side, "Husband, I know you don't want to burden youngest junior brother. But, don't forget, youngest junior brother used to be a loose cultivator. In my country of Xi's cultivation world, he wandered for more than 20 years and cultivated to the 10th level of aura refining with his own ability. If you tell him about this, maybe youngest junior brother will have a way." Yan Qinglian's meaning was the same as Xin Ye's, but Xiaohua was very happy when he heard it. He also smiled and said, "Eldest senior brother, you don't need to be polite with younger brother. Younger brother's luck has always been very good. If eldest senior brother tells younger brother might be able to take it out and give it to you right now." How could Xiang Yang be willing to tell? He repeatedly waved his hand. Forget it. Who knows how many disciples in our Imperial Thunder sect who can't advance to the next level have searched all the major trading markets without any results. How can you, an aura refining disciple, find it? It's useless to tell you. Useless. Why don't you tell me? Xiaohua's heart was moved. He said with a smile, "Younger brother only heard that embryonic breathing pills are useful for aura-refining disciples to break through bottlenecks. I still don't know what medicinal pills foundation-building cultivators use to break through. If eldest senior brother wants embryonic breathing pills, younger brother has them here." "What? Xiaohua. You have embryonic breathing pills?" Xiaohua suddenly asked. Could it be, eldest senior brother needs embryonic breathing pills? Xiaohua was stunned, but when he looked at Xiang Yang, there wasn't any joy on his face. Instead, there was joy on Xiaohua's face. "Yes, master. Disciple has embryonic breathing pills, and I was preparing to take them myself." Xiaohua pretended to pat his storage bag and took out a bottle of embryonic breathing pills. He said, "Disciple spent a lot of effort to find 3 pills." Xiaohua didn't wait for Xiaohua to finish speaking. With a wave of his hand, the jade bottle fell into Xiaohua's hand. Xiaohua opened the bottle and took a sniff. He said with a smile, "Sure enough, it's embryonic breathing pills. Master is taking them away." As he said that, he didn't wait for Xiaohua to agree. He pointed his finger, and an embryonic breathing pill flew out of the jade bottle. He then threw the jade bottle back to Xiaohua. Xiaohua was already in the 12th layer of the aura refining realm, so he naturally didn't need embryonic breathing pills. After he took the bottle, he said with a smile, "Master, is 1 pill okay? If not, take a few more." At this moment, Xiaohua took the embryonic breathing pills and rolled his eyes at Xiaohua. If one pill can break through a bottleneck, then one pill will naturally be okay. More pills will be useless. If one pill can't, then more pills will be a waste. However, Xiaohua, master. I won't tell you now. When you come back from the Feather Immortal Assembly, there will be benefits for you. Xiaohua turned his head and asked Xiangyang, eldest martial brother, you don't need this, right? Xiangyang shook his head. However, when he saw that Xiaohua actually had such a rare embryonic breathing pill, he seemed to have something to say, but he swallowed the words back down. Looking at this eldest martial brother of his who was always thinking for other people and was also somewhat hesitant, Xiaohua was also helpless. He put the jade bottle away. At the side, Yan Qinglian was somewhat anxious, but Xiangyang slightly shook his head at her. Yan Qinglian could only bite her lips and hold back from saying anything. Xue Minghui saw everything. She helplessly and happily put away the embryonic breathing pills. She could only say, Xiaohua, actually, what your eldest martial brother needs is about the same as embryonic breathing pills. It's one of the main ingredients for refining embryonic breathing pills. What? Xiaohua was stunned. The expression on his face was somewhat frozen. He said inwardly, it can't be so coincidental, right? Sure enough, he heard Xue Minghui continue, qi condensation cultivators use medicinal pills to break through bottlenecks. Foundation establishment cultivators can also use them to break through bottlenecks. However, that medicinal pill isn't called embryonic breathing pills, but embryonic reflection pills. The refining method for embryonic reflection pills has already been lost. Then, what eldest martial brother is using, could it be, the mother-child spirit fruit? Xiaohua asked somewhat stutteringly. Yes, it's the mother-child spirit fruit. At the side, Yan Qinglian really couldn't help but say, however, the mother-child spirit fruit and the one used for embryonic breathing pills are different in age. It won't be effective unless it's several hundred years old. Alas, several years ago, I heard that a several hundred-year-old mother-child spirit fruit appeared in an auction in Yenyuan City. Because the disciples of Splendid Sect, Qiqiao Sect, and Xuanyan School weren't prepared enough, they didn't succeed. Many disciples of my Imperial Thunder Sect went to Yenyuan City to try their luck. In the end, you also know that junior martial brother Qing Huo was one of them. He didn't find the mother-child spirit fruit, but instead encountered other things. Hearing this, Xiaohua's expression became even more brilliant. However, he still had some hesitation in his heart. That mother-child spirit fruit had been in his space for so long. What year was it now? Even he himself didn't know. In short, it was definitely much older than the one he exchanged for the cultivation method that year. If he suddenly took it out, many thanks for mistress's concern. Xiang Yang's expression was extremely calm. He bowed and said, this disciple has already cultivated to foundation establishment. Even if my cultivation can't advance even half a step, having master and mistress's concern is already enough. This kind of thing can't be asked for, so don't let junior martial brother worry. Ha ha ha. Can't be asked for. Hearing this, Xiaohua laughed loudly. In his heart, he seemed to have thought it through a bit. Although family love couldn't be casually tested, if one put family love to the back of one's mind because of misgivings, then, was it still family love? Chapter 1594. Seeing Xiaohua laugh, everyone was slightly stunned. Xiaohua took the storage bag from his waist and handed it to Xiangyang. Eldest senior brother, take a look. What's inside? Xiangyang's heart skipped a beat, and his tone stuttered. No, Xiaohua threw the storage bag to Xiangyang. Didn't eldest senior brother say that it can only be found by chance? Now that you've encountered it, it's eldest senior brother's opportunity. Ah. Xiangyang didn't speak. Yan Qinglian flew over and snatched the storage bag from Xiangyang's hands. When she opened it, she couldn't help but exclaim. It's really, the mother-child spirit fruit. Really? Helplessly, he also jumped up. With a wave of his hand, that storage bag was taken over by him again. He stuck his head out to look at the things inside and laughed. Ha ha ha. Xiangyang, you're lucky. Xiaohua, there's nothing good in here, only this mother-child spirit fruit, eh? Xiaohua, why didn't you put the mother-child spirit fruit in the jade box? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Master, disciple is poor. I couldn't find any jade box, so I just casually left it there. You poor pedantic. Helplessly scolding, he slapped his hand and took out a jade box from the storage bag. He handed it to Xiangyang, then pointed at the storage bag. That mother-child spirit fruit flew out of the storage bag and floated in the air. This mother-child spirit fruit. Xue Minghui, who hadn't spoken all this time, opened her mouth in shock when she saw the mother-child spirit fruit floating in the air. Her face was filled with disbelief. Of course, the mother-child spirit fruit in the air was still the same, but it was covered in golden runes. Those runes were denser and more lifelike than the last time Xiaohua saw them. This mother-child spirit fruit is probably several thousand years old. Yan Qinglian also woke up at this time and muttered. It can't be. Xiaohua also turned pale with fright and said. Disciple thinks that this thing is several hundred years old. What do you know? Helplessly, he continued. How can several hundred years old runes be so dense? Disciple only knows that this thing is a mother-child spirit fruit. Last time, that person said it was several hundred years old. Disciple thought that this was also several hundred years old. Hua said embarrassedly. You have another one. Xiangyang was stunned. That's right, Xiaohua said disapprovingly. Little brother's mother spirit fruit was exchanged for a heavenly laws embodiment technique in Yanyuan City. Otherwise, where did little brother get this cultivation method from? You. Xiangyang was speechless. Others couldn't find the mother-child spirit fruit in their entire lives, but this guy had taken out 2 in one go. Moreover, one was several hundred years old, and the other was several thousand years old. But, if Xiangyang knew that as soon as Xiaohua's mother-child spirit fruit was picked, the other mother-child spirit fruit in his space would immediately ripen and be ready to be picked at any time, what would he think? Disciple, do you have 1,000-year-old Lingwan grass? He chuckled helplessly. Master, this disciple's storage pouch is with you. Do you think this disciple still has more? Xiaohua innocently replied. Helplessly shaking his hand, he threw the storage bag to Xiaohua and said, Your storage bag is so tattered, where would you find the Lingyi grass? Xiaohua reached out to catch it and tied it to his waist. He smiled apologetically and said, Besides, this disciple doesn't even know what a Lingwan grass is. How could I have it? Helplessly rolling his eyes, he threw a jade slip to Xiaohua and said, You brat, you're lucky. Help Master take a look. If you can find it, Master will give you benefits. Xiaohua took the jade slip and threw it into the storage bag without even looking. Master, don't count on this disciple. This mother-child spirit fruit is also a coincidence. I didn't count on you in the first place. I just wanted you to be careful. Helplessly looking at Xiangyang and Yan Qinglian who were still somewhat absent-minded, he berated, Enough, it's like you haven't seen anything good. Quickly put this thing away properly. Yes, this disciple understands. Xiangyang put the mother-child spirit fruit into the jade box in a fluster and carefully put it away in the storage bag. The mother-child spirit fruit is not comparable to the embryonic breathing pill. Who knows how many Foundation establishment disciples in the Imperial Thunder sect dream of it. And this mother-child spirit fruit is only enough for you alone. You must not let this slip. Helplessly warned. This disciple understands, this disciple understands. Xiang Yang nodded repeatedly. Good, do you have the sect's secret technique? I have it long ago. Go back and enter seclusion right now. Helplessly, he instructed, perhaps when Xiaohua returns, you can also exit seclusion. However, even if you exit seclusion, you absolutely cannot speak of it. Yes. This disciple understands. Xiang Yang nodded, but looking at Xiaohua, he said, however, how can this disciple not see little junior brother off this time? Bullshit, it's not like he's not coming back. What's there to see him off for? Helplessly glaring at him, he said, it's not easy for you to have such an opportunity. Why don't you hurry up and grasp it? If someone steals this thing, you won't even have time to regret it. Eldest senior brother, hurry up and go back. Xiaohua also advised, this is the only thing I have. In the future, I'm afraid it'll be hard to come across it again. When I return, I'll see the glory of middle stage Foundation establishment eldest senior brother. And, little junior brother, I thank you very much. Xiang Yang patted Xiaohua's shoulder and laughed. Although Xiang Yang didn't say much, just the word thank you made Xiaohua feel the sincerity in his heart. Thinking about the things Xiang Yang had done for him in the past few years, Xiaohua's heart also felt a lot better. Little junior brother, I have to go back and protect your eldest senior brother, so I won't see you off. I hope you can show your talent at the Feather Immortal Assembly and win glory for our Imperial Thunder sect and our myriad Thunder Valley. Yan Qinglian said sincerely. Although Xiaohua didn't plan to show his talent at the Feather Immortal Assembly, he was too embarrassed to say it in front of helplessness, so he could only smile and say, junior brother will do his best. Then, Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian said goodbye and rushed back to the myriad Thunder Valley to enter seclusion. Xiaohua also followed helplessness and Zhuo Minghui out of the Eastern Ridges spell formation. Before leaving the spell formation, Xiaohua still followed helplessness's instructions and picked some Blaze Dawn grass, and had helplessness bring it to the Thunderous Palace. As for the Eastern Ridge spell formation's command tablet, helplessness temporarily held it and would return it to Xiaohua when he returned. After flying with helplessness for a while, Xiaohua finally understood that their destination was the Heavenly Thunder Palace. He naturally didn't have the chance to go to the Thunderous Palace to exchange for any yellow talismans or medicinal pills. If Xiang Yang hadn't helped him exchange some in advance, he really would have gone on the journey empty-handed. The Heavenly Thunder Palace was the same as usual. There wasn't the slightest bit of celebration, and it wasn't even as lively as the day of the disciple selection. Only when Xiaohua walked into the Spring Thunder Palace did he see a trace of liveliness. He wasn't the latest to arrive, but he definitely wasn't the first either. At this moment, the Spring Thunder Palace was already occupied by about 10 12th layer Qi refining disciples. There were also Foundation establishment cultivators next to these disciples. Looking at the way they were giving pointers, they should be their masters. Needless to say, Xiaohua met all these disciples. The female disciple who expelled him from the illusory realm as soon as they met was also standing there, and a similarly cold and elegant late-stage Foundation establishment female cultivator was whispering something to her. Xiaohua followed helplessness in, and naturally attracted the attention of others. Every disciple revealed a trace of surprise when they saw Xiaohua, because Xiaohua's flying technique left a deep impression on these people. It was something they couldn't catch up to no matter what. At the same time, after the initial surprise, a trace of disdain appeared on their faces. After all, passing by running away was really shameful. Xiaohua was too lazy to pay attention to them. His gaze swept past them, and he followed Helplessness and Zhuo Minghui to a corner of the main hall and stood there steadily. However, before he could stand properly, another 3 people quickly walked into the Spring Thunder Palace. The one in the lead was a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator with grizzled hair, a short and fat figure, and 2 triangular eyes faintly flashing with a trace of light. Behind him were 2 12th-layer Qi refining disciples. One was at the early stage, and the other was at the peak of the late stage. Xiao Hua recognized the peak late-stage Qi refining disciple. It was Wang Yunxiao, who entered the Imperial Thunder sect at the same time as him. And, it seems that the Foundation establishment senior in front should be Jin Yu. He was the one who snatched Wang Yunxiao away first. Xiao Hua thought in his heart. He stole a glance at Helplessness, and sure enough, Helplessness's expression became somewhat unsightly. When Jin Yu entered the Spring Thunder Palace, his eyes flashed. He had already seen Helplessness, so he didn't go anywhere and directly walked towards Helplessness. Is there going to be a good show to watch? Xiao Hua muttered in his heart and slightly lowered his head. Junior Martial Brother Helplessness, Junior Martial Sister Zhua. Jin Yu cupped his hands and saluted from afar. Helplessness also had no choice, so he could only return the salute and say, "Greetings, Senior Martial Brother Jin Yu." Zhuo Minghui at the side also saluted and called him Senior Martial Brother. After the 3 of them saluted, Jin Yu waved his hand and said to Wang Yunxiao, "Yunxiao, come and greet your martial uncle Helplessness." Martial uncle Helplessness was the person I told you about earlier. When you were participating in the selection, he was the one who took a fancy to you first. It's a pity that he had an important matter to attend to that day and couldn't come. That's why I was able to take advantage of you and accept you as my disciple. Disciple Wang Yunxiao greets Martial Uncle Helplessness. Many thanks for Martial Uncle's good intentions that day. Wang Yunxiao was very courteous and very respectfully bowed to salute. Get up, I don't have the fortune to accept you as my disciple. It's really too convenient for your master. Helplessness said indifferently. Junior Martial Brother, look at what you're saying. It seems like you're still blaming me. Jin Yu said with a smile, no matter if it's you or I, aren't we both disciples of the Thunderous Palace? Think about it, if I didn't accept Yunxiao into the Thunderous Palace and someone else took him first, wouldn't it be too convenient for the other Thunderous Palaces? Today. Isn't Yunxiao representing the other Thunderous Palaces to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly? Moreover, isn't this disciple of yours not bad? Isn't he also representing my Thunderous Palace to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly? Look at this disciple of mine. He doesn't even dare to sign up for the selection. He's too far away from your disciple. Come, Yuqian, greet your martial uncle Helplessness and, this senior martial brother. It's indeed Jin Yuqian. Xiao Hua thought. At this time, he also waved his hand helplessly and said, Xiao Hua, come and greet your martial uncle Jin Yu, senior martial brother Yunxiao and junior martial brother Yuqian. Yes, Xiao Hua and Jin Yuqian both answered. They stepped forward and greeted their master first, then greeted each other. Chapter 1595. After Xiao Hua and Jin Yuqian greeted each other, Jin Yu waved his hand and said, Yuqian, don't be too affectionate. Xiao Hua was the number 1 in the disciple selection that year. Furthermore, he participated in the Feather Immortal Assembly with the cultivation of early stage level 12 Qi refining. He is indeed a role model for you to follow. Master Disciple has senior brother Yunxiao as a role model. Why would a disciple who only knows how to run for his life be a role model? Could it be that you also want disciple to piss his pants in terror and run away the moment he sees an enemy? Jin Yuqian couldn't help but refute his master. Furthermore, I heard senior brother say that he didn't use his full strength that day. Otherwise, Xiao Hua's number one position would be unknown. When these words came out, not only was Xiao Hua greatly shocked, even Xiao Hua himself opened his eyes wide. Xiao Hua's heart wasn't angry, but rather, he couldn't help but want to laugh. Yes, it was a feeling of secretly laughing. There was a feeling of patting Jin Yuqian's head and saying, "Good boy." This Jin Yuqian was truly of the highest quality. Not only did he offend Xiao Hua with a single sentence, he even sold Wang Yunxiao out. Of course, the most important thing was that he refuted Jinyu in front of Xiao Hua. A disciple with such aptitude could actually snatch my rainbow epiphyllum. Even if you are late-stage qi refining, how can you be my opponent? Xiao Hua sneered in his heart. He glanced at Wang Yunxiao, whose face was slightly red, but his gaze was fixed on the runes on the ceiling as if he didn't hear a word. Jin Yuqian. Master, haven't you always told disciple to speak the truth? Disciple. Jin Yuqian still felt wronged. Forget it, go back first. Reflect on your mistakes in the reflection pavilion. Wait for me to return. Jinyu waved his hand powerlessly and said. Yes, disciple obeys. This time, Jin Yuqian was well behaved. He cupped his hands and saluted Xiao Hua before leaving the Spring Thunder Hole. Looking at Jin Yuqian's back, Jinyu smiled apologetically and said, "My sex disciple is unfilial, I've let junior brother helplessness see a joke." You flatter me, you flatter me. This kid's nature is frank and sincere. This is precisely the realm that we cultivators pursue. Congratulations, senior brother. Little brother is truly envious. Helplessly, he said in all seriousness. Xiao Hua, who was at the side, had long burst out laughing. His expression was strange. Wang Yunxiao said in a low voice, "Junior brother Xiao, my humble junior brother's knowledge is shallow and has spoken rudely. I hope junior brother can forgive me." No. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, "Junior martial brother Jin's nature is frank and sincere, which is exactly what little brother has been pursuing all my life. Little brother can't wait to be envious, so how could I have any complaints? Besides, what junior martial brother Jin said is the truth." Xiao Hua and Helplessness's tone were the same. They were really a good pair of master and disciple. Jin Yu was a little embarrassed. At this time, Helplessness pointed his finger and shouted, "Senior martial brother Jin, look, the disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earth Thunder Palace are here." Hearing this, Jin Yu took the opportunity to turn his head. Looking at the group of men and women entering the door, he said in a low voice, "Alas, among the 8 Thunder Palaces, the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earth Thunder Palace are still the leaders. They have taken up more than half of the disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly." Indeed, when Xiao Hua took a closer look, among the disciples who came in from outside the Spring Thunder Palace, there were 10 male and female disciples in the 12th level of the Refinement Realm. They should be the disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earth Thunder Palace who were participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly. The disciple in the middle level of the 12th level of the Refinement Realm that Xiao Hua had seen before was also among them. That's right. The Feather Immortal Assembly has 20 disciples. Basically, the Zhen, Dui, Can, Li, Zhen, and Sun Lightning Palaces can send out 2 disciples each. The remaining disciples are all from the Qian and Kuan Lightning Palaces. This time, my Heavenly Thunder Palace has 2 disciples, while the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earth Thunder Palace have chosen 10. I wonder which Thunder Palace is short of disciples? Do you still need to say? It's definitely the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Heavenly Thunder Palace. The disciples they choose are all at the back, and it's difficult for them to become great talents. The Qian and Kuan Lightning Palaces have always selected disciples from the Imperial Lightning Sect. Moreover, every time they select disciples from the outside, those with the best aptitudes and the younger ones are always first picked by them. How can their disciples not be powerful? At this time, Zhenyu was helpless. He looked at Wang Yunxiao and said, "If Yunxiao came to my Imperial Thunder sect 10 years ago, I'm afraid he would have been chosen by the Heavenly Thunder Palace." Hee, don't say that. Someone gave up the opportunity to be a disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and wanted to choose other Thunder Palaces. Zhenyu glanced at Xiaohua helplessly. It was hard to tell whether it was ridicule or gratification in his eyes. Junior brother, where did you learn to be careful? Which stupid disciple is it? Zhenyu was very curious. He didn't connect this matter with Xiaohua at all. I also don't know who it is. I just casually heard other junior brothers talking about it. Zhenyu's gaze turned towards the hall door as he said indifferently. Stupid as a cow. Damn it. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this time, the 10 disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earth Thunder Palace had already walked to the center of the Spring Thunder Hall. A slightly older disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace waved his hand and said, "Disciples, greet the masters of the other Thunder Palaces as well as the other fellow senior brothers and junior brothers." Yes. The 6 disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace stood where they were and replied in a loud and clear voice. Soon after, they uniformly bowed towards everyone in the Spring Thunder Hall and said, "Disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace greet martial uncles, senior brothers, and junior brothers." That voice was very loud and clear. Fortunately, there wasn't much dust on the Spring Thunder Hall, otherwise it would definitely have been shaken down. Xiaohua and the others also didn't dare to neglect and all returned the greeting. Immediately after, a female voice also called out without any trace of politeness, "Disciples of the Earth Thunder Palace also greet masters." Yes, for voices like the chirping of orioles rang out, "Disciples of the Earth Thunder Palace greet martial uncles and senior brothers." Although this voice wasn't as loud as the male disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace, it won in that it was crisp and didn't have an overbearing aura, making it refreshing to hear. Soon after, the disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earth Thunder Palace walked to the front of the Spring Thunder Palace's high platform under the guidance of their masters and stood in their respective positions. And the atmosphere of the entire Spring Thunder Hall seemed to have become somewhat cold because of the arrival of these 2 disciples. "Master, over there are 2 old friends of this disciple. They are also disciples of famous aristocratic families. This disciple will go and meet their masters." Wang Yunxiao had already seen Yuan Bo and Min Gu long ago. He smiled and said to Zhenyu, "Won't you go and take a look?" Zhenyu was already unwilling to see Zhenyu's face and said with a smile, "Since they are your old friends, Master naturally has to go and take a look." Wang Yunxiao turned his head and said with a smile, "Junior brother Xiao, won't you come?" Xiaohua saw Yuan Bo and Min Gu earlier than Wang Yunxiao, but these 2 seemed to be different from before. They didn't seem too affectionate when they saw Xiaohua, so Xiaohua also pretended not to see them. Hearing this, he waved his hand and said, "Senior brother Wang, go ahead. We'll go together. We'll talk later." Zhenyu and Wang Yunxiao helplessly nodded to Xiaohua and left, walking towards where Yuan Bo and Min Gu were standing. Where's that female disciple called Sun Shu? I heard Shui say that she also qualified. Why didn't she come?" Xiaohua suddenly thought of something and looked around. Sure enough, he didn't see Sun Shu. Just as he was thinking, 2 figures hurriedly flashed past outside the Spring Thunder Hole. Shui. Xiaohua couldn't help but be surprised when he saw that figure. Everyone said that a foundation establishment master would send them off, but this Sun Shu was good, directly sending off a junior sister. Sun Shu's behavior was even more interesting. When she entered the Spring Thunder Hall, she first looked around. When she saw Xiaohua, she didn't have any expression on her face and walked towards him, completely ignoring the greeting of the female disciple who seemed to be from mythical Thunder Palace. Seeing the two beautiful female disciples walking towards him, Xiaohua was a bit stunned. Zhuo Minghui was puzzled at first, but when she saw Xiaohua also raise his head, she couldn't help but feel happy. Sure enough, Sun Shu and Xue Xue walked in front of the three and bowed. Disciple greets martial uncles. Xiaohua and Zhuo Minghui hurriedly returned the greeting, but Xiaohua was still puzzled. Martial nephews, which junior sister of Sun Thunder Palace are you two disciples of? Martial uncles, disciple is Xue Xue. Several years ago, I entered the Imperial Thunder sect with Xiaohua. Wasn't martial uncles also at the Spring Thunder Hall that day? Xue Xue said very shyly. You? Xiaohua suddenly realized. Of course, Xiaohua wasn't present when Sun Ming accepted Xue Xue, but when Sun Ming brought Xue Xue to the Jade Archive Hall, didn't she invite Xiaohua along? Xiaohua even used Xue Xue to tease Xiaohua, so he naturally had some impression of Xue Xue. He should have remembered. It was no wonder that Xiaohua didn't connect Xue Xue with his previous impression of her. The current Xue Xue was different from several years ago. Not to mention that her cultivation was already at the beginning of the 9th layer of qi refining, even her appearance had changed greatly. Her eyes were bright and kind, and her beauty was moving. Coupled with her snow-white skin and the gradually forming grace between her brows, she didn't look like the ugly duckling of the past. Since he knew she was Sun Ming's disciple, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly returned the greeting. Martial Uncle Sun Ming, how have you been? Why didn't she come to see you off? Sun Shu smiled. Master had some matters to attend to and couldn't leave, so she let disciple come. Junior sister Xue wanted to come out and get some fresh air, so she followed along. As he spoke, he glanced at Xiaohua. Xiaohua rubbed his nose and smiled. Xue Xue, you've advanced really quickly. Congratulations, congratulations. Xue Xue said unhappily. Xiaohua, are you congratulating me or mocking me? You're already at the 12th layer of qi refining, and you're still congratulating me, a 9th layer of qi refining? Xiaohua chuckled. I'm just trying to find something to talk about. Xue Xue liked Xiaohua very much. She covered her mouth and laughed brilliantly. Beside her, Zhuo Minghui stepped forward and whispered. Xue Xue, what kind of martial arts do you practice? Why do you look so beautiful? I'm afraid you were born with it. This kind of topic was a woman's favorite. Although Sun Shu was cold and elegant, she couldn't avoid it. While accompanying Xue Xue and Zhuo Minghui, Xiaohua, who looked very innocent and kept rubbing his nose, Xiaohua. Chapter 1596. Xue Xue originally came to see Xiaohua, but when she saw Zhuo Minghui, she immediately started chatting with Zhuo Minghui. Zhuo Minghui also felt that Xue Xue was more and more pleasing to the eye. She was very happy and left Xiaohua to the side. After a while, there was a slight commotion in front of them. Xiaohua looked up and saw several cultivators standing on the platform. The one in front was Zhen Qing, a golden core cultivator from Zhenlei Palace. Beside him was a foundation establishment cultivator in the late stage. He had a beard on his face and looked very rude. The foundation establishment cultivator's voice was very loud and clear. He said, "Are all the disciples from the various lightning palaces here?" The Spring Thunder Hall was silent and no one answered. Xiaohua laughed secretly. He didn't know how that person would answer if there were still people who didn't come. Since all the disciples are here, we will set off immediately. I am Zhen Yu from Zhenlei Palace. I am the deputy envoy of the Tai Ching sect in Meng Nation to participate in the Feather Immortal Conference. In order to ensure the safety of the disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Conference, Martial Uncle Zhen Qing from Zhenlei Palace will be the envoy personally. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the safety of the disciples. After Zhen Yu finished speaking, he turned his head and seemed to ask Zhen Qing. Zhen Qing shook his head slightly and waved his hand. Lightning flashed and a pitch-black magic weapon flew out of the hole. Disciples, let's board the boat outside the hall. Zhen Yu shouted loudly and bowed to let Zhen Qing go first. Zhen Qing nodded slightly and stepped down from the platform. He cupped his hands at the disciples below and walked out of the Spring Thunder Hole. Then, the disciples of Qianquan Lightning Palace followed him out. Everyone moved. At this moment, Xue Xue walked in front of Xiaohua and whispered, "Xiaohua, you have to be careful." Xiaohua smiled and nodded. "Don't worry. I think your senior sister has already told you how I passed. I will just take this trip as an eye-opener. Nothing will happen to me if I don't stand out." "How did you pass? Could it be that there is something strange?" Xue Xue was slightly curious, but she didn't pursue the matter. She stretched out her hand and removed the storage pouch from her waist before passing it over, and then she said with slight embarrassment, "The things within the storage pouch aren't much, but they were made by the talisman crafting disciples of my Thunderstorm Palace. Master gave them to me, so take them and use them today." Xiaohua took the storage pouch and opened it to take a look. Apart from a few spirit stones, there were also medicinal pills and talismans. Naturally, there were also a lot of fireball talismans. Xue Xue continued softly, "I don't know what kind of talisman you used, but seeing that you're here. The fireball charms used in the valley are very handy, so I took a few more." "Ah, very good, very good." Xiaohua didn't hold back. He waved his hand and took away all the items in the storage pouch. Xue Xue was happy when she saw that Xiaohua didn't treat her as an outsider. She took the storage pouch and said happily, "I hope that you and my senior sister will be able to perform well in the Feather Immortal Gathering." Sun Shu smiled faintly and followed the crowd out of the Spring Thunder Hole. Behind them, Yuan Bo and Min Gu didn't look very good. Wang Yunxiao looked at the two of them meaningfully. Outside the Spring Thunder Hole, a small lightning boat was parked on the empty ground. The pitch-black boat had faint purple lightning and sparks flashing on it. Zhen Qing was already standing at the bow of the boat with her hands behind her back. "All right, Xiaohua, you can go up now. Be careful." She stopped helplessly and said in a low voice, "The Feather Immortal Gathering is a good opportunity to make a name for yourself, but there are also certain risks. If you really want to focus on cultivation, you can just go and take a look." Xiaohua smiled when he saw that his master had finally relented. "Thank you for your understanding, master." She glared at him helplessly and said, "I'm not done yet. If there's a chance, why don't you show them a few moves and let them see the power of our myriad Thunder Valley?" "I understand," Xiaohua said with a smile. "You have to rely on yourself outside. Be careful. If there's anything wrong, follow your grandmaster closely." Xue Minghui also reminded him. Xiaohua looked at his master's wife who was treating him like a child and said with a smile, "I understand." Then, he looked at Xue Xue and nodded slightly. He turned to Sun Shu and said with a smile, "Senior Sun, let's go." Sun Shu nodded and flew up the lightning boat with Xiaohua. The two of them stood at the edge of the lightning boat and waved at Helplessness and the others. When all the disciples boarded the lightning boat, Zhen Qing waved her hand and cast a spell on the formation plate of the lightning boat. The lightning boat buzzed and immediately flew into the sky and flew away at an extremely fast speed. When the lightning boat disappeared, Xue Minghui smiled and said to Xue Xue in front of the Spring Thunder Hall, "Xue Xue, if you're free after cultivating, can you come to the Myriad Thunder Valley for a chat?" Shue Shue's face was slightly red. She bowed and said, I still have to tell Master. If Master agrees, I'll definitely go. I will take my leave first. After Shue Shue flew away, Helplessness and Zhuo Minghui also flew to the myriad Thunder Valley. In the sky, Helplessness sighed. Xiaohua, this brat. Instead of cultivating properly, he's actually thinking about dual cultivation. However, this Shue Shue is really not bad. And then Sun Shu is also good. Zhuo Minghui said with a smile. 2. Helplessness curled her lips and said, Can Xiaohua handle it? Is he still cultivating? Putting aside Helplessness and Zhuo Minghui worrying about Xiaohua's cultivation, on the lightning boat, Xiaohua was originally standing together with Sun Shu. However, when the surrounding people were sitting cross-legged, cultivating or whispering, the two of them became awkward. Sun Shu looked at the disciples of Distant Thunder Palace in the distance and said, I will go over there and see Senior Sister Sun, please. Xiaohua quickly said, Disciple also needs to cultivate. After Sun Shu left, Xiaohua immediately sat down and took out a soul-gathering pill from his storage bag. He ate it and closed his eyes to cultivate. The lightning boat was extremely fast, but Meng country was indeed far away. For more than 10 days, the lightning boat didn't stop at all, but they still didn't reach Meng country. During this time, Xiaohua ignored everyone and only hid in a corner of the lightning boat to cultivate. Wang Yunxiao and the other two looked at Xiaohua's appearance and also extinguished the thought of catching up with him. Instead, they found an opportunity to sit together with the disciples of Distant Thunder Palace and Converted Thunder Palace. Looking at the 10 disciples of Heavenly Thunder Palace and Earth Thunder Palace, they seemed to have a feeling of superiority. They only talked to these 2 disciples of Heavenly Thunder Palace and ignored the others who went to talk to them. After a long time, no one went to eat soft rebuffs. The lightning boat was controlled by Zhen Qing and Zhen Yu. The 2 of them took turns to rest and didn't interfere much with the movements of the 20 disciples. However, when they occasionally saw the indifference and arrogance of the disciples of Heavenly Thunder Palace, Zhen Qing slightly frowned. Of course, Zhen Qing also paid attention to Xiaohua. After all, Xiaohua was the only one who closed his eyes and cultivated the moment he boarded the thunder ship. He didn't talk to anyone at all. Furthermore, he had met Xiaohua during the disciple selection. He was also the one who gave Xiaohua the concealed flame physique. Therefore, when he saw Xiaohua reach the early stage of the 12th layer of the qi refining realm in just a few years, Zhen Qing couldn't help but nod her head slightly. On this day, it was a dreary and misty day. Raindrops fell from the sky and hit the lightning boat. The lightning boat originally had a defensive brilliance, but Zhen Qing seemed to like this weather. He actually removed the defensive formation, allowing the raindrops to hit his body. A strong wind blew everyone's clothes and long hair. Woo-woo, the sound of a flute sobbed. Sitting upright on the lightning boat, Zhen Qing started to play his flute. Xiaohua was cultivating when he suddenly heard the mournful sound of the flute. The true qi flowing in his meridians became sluggish at first, then it actually started to flow with the flute sound. Xiaohua felt as if he was at the lakeside of a drizzling lake. The mirror-like surface of the lake was disrupted by the raindrops. Countless black dots formed on the surface of the lake, making a pitter-patter-patter sound. That sound was like a chaotic state of mind, unable to calm down. There was a faint mist by the lakeside. Xiaohua felt that there seemed to be a person he was worried about in the mist. However, the mournful voice separated him from that person. He couldn't see her clearly, nor could he touch her. Xiaohua's heart was filled with grief. He tried his best to rush into the mist, wanting to see what was going on. However, the more hurried he was, the more confused he became. He walked through the grass by the lakeside and walked through the forest by the lakeside. All along, he could only see a corner of a pure white dress fluttering in front of his eyes. At this moment, the sound of the flute suddenly became louder. It was like a strong ray of sunlight, piercing through the mist. The pure white dress suddenly flashed, and the graceful figure suddenly turned around. What entered Xiaohua's eyes was a beautiful face. That face seemed unfamiliar yet familiar. Only the beauty mole on the left side of the chin was particularly eye-catching. Dream? Xiaohua couldn't help but groan, Fairy Hongxiao. With this call, Xiaohua suddenly woke up. He didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest and hurriedly entered the space. It was very easy for him to comprehend the heavenly Tao. He no longer paid attention to Zhen Qing's disturbing flute sound. However, Xiaohua, who had always been emotionless during cultivation, had a drop of sparkling and translucent tear seeping out from the corner of his eye. Xiaohua sank into cultivation. After an unknown period of time, his entire body suddenly trembled violently, and he was jolted awake from his cultivation. "Io, what's going on?" Xiaohua opened his eyes and saw that it was actually chaos. The entire thunder ship was shaking violently. Everyone on the thunder ship couldn't stand steadily and was floating in the air. As for Zhen Qing, she had already put away her flute somewhere. She flew out of the thunder ship and released her divine sense to observe carefully. Xiaohua frowned. He didn't fly up in a hurry. Instead, the true qi in his body moved slightly. His entire body was nailed to the thunder ship in a very strange manner. Why are there tears at the corner of my eyes? Xiaohua felt that something was wrong with his face. He used his hand to wipe away the tears. At this moment, he heard Zhen Qing's somewhat nervous voice, "Zhenyu, control the thunder ship first. I will go down and take a look." "Yes, disciple obeys," Zhenyu replied. Just as he was about to control the thunder ship, a spirit beast that looked very similar to a leopard suddenly flew out from the pitch-black clouds below the thunder ship. It crashed into the bottom of the thunder ship, causing the thunder ship to almost capsize. The people on the thunder ship were also swaying left and right. Chapter 1597. Flying Leopard. Evil Creature. When Zhen Qing, who was flying in the air, saw that the spirit beast had actually escaped from her spiritual sense attack, she couldn't help but become furious. She slapped her storage pouch and a 5-colored object flew into the air. It was Zhen Qing's favorite magic tool, Serenity Seeker. This Serenity Seeker was different from ordinary magic tools. It looked like a flute. When it flew into the air, a cold whimper sound was emitted from the Serenity Seeker. A sound attack magic tool. Xiaohua's figure stood steadily on the tilted thunderboat. He had already released his Buddhist awareness and saw the situation outside the thunderboat clearly. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. However, when he thought about how Zhen Qing was proficient in music, this kind of formless sound attack magic tool was definitely Zhen Qing's best choice. When Zhen Qing used it, it would definitely have boundless power. Sure enough, when the Serenity Seeker flew into the air, it emitted a faint brilliance. When Zhen Qing's magic power was activated, the brilliance seemed to follow a kind of rhythm. It would expand and shrink from time to time. Moreover, it was sometimes fast and sometimes slow. The flying leopard that knocked the thunderboat askew was currently leaping into the air vigorously. On its bronze-colored body, its short fur was standing upright like steel. The spirit beast's forehooves were suspended in the air. On its forelimbs, there were 2 wings that looked like feathers yet were not feathers. They were also flesh yet not flesh. The edges of the wings were connected to its body by a thin layer of flesh. The flying leopard's eyes were glowing green and faintly flashing with brilliance. The sound of the Serenity Seeker spread out invisibly. In the beginning, the flying leopard didn't hear it. It opened its sharp teeth and swayed its head left and right. However, as Jen Qing's magic power was activated, the sound wave became even denser. It was like a silk net that wrapped around the flying leopard. At this moment, the flying leopard that was accumulating power finally sensed the danger. Wow! The flying leopard raised its head and roared. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was sucked into it. Rays of faint brilliance appeared from the top of the flying leopard's head and flowed to its tail like water. At the same time, the flying leopard's two wings violently flapped as if it was trying its best to break free from the restraint of the sound wave. However, the winged leopard's limbs were twitching and its body was twisting rapidly. Jen Qing's magic item was still very powerful. The winged leopard was slowly being restrained by the sound waves. At this moment, the thunder ship had already stabilized under Jen Yu's control. Everyone landed on the thunder ship in shock. Seeing that the flying leopard beast was captured, Xiao Hua and the others heaved a sigh of relief. There were even a few disciples who were eager to rush out of the thunder ship to help Jen Qing. However, without Jen Qing's permission, Jen Yu didn't dare to approach the thunderboat. He could only stop the thunderboat from afar. The flying leopard beast struggled even harder, but its movements were getting softer and softer. The chaotic heaven-earth spiritual qi in the surroundings was also gradually calming down. In just a short while, Jen Qing would be able to completely subdue the flying leopard beast. However, just as everyone thought that victory was in their hands, the flying leopard beast stopped struggling. It raised its head with great difficulty and opened its mouth, revealing its fangs. There was a faint earthy yellow glow in its mouth. Once this glow appeared, the heaven-earth spiritual qi that had just calmed down became chaotic again. It was all rapidly sucked into the flying leopard beast's mouth. With a deafening roar, the flying leopard beast's body once again emitted a glow. This time, every time the glow flowed through the flying leopard beast's body, the flying leopard beast's body grew larger. This is bad. Seeing this, Jen Qing was shocked. At the same time she activated her magic power, she clenched her teeth and quickly moved her fingers. When Netherworld Seeking released the soundless wave, it let out another sound. The sound was very unpleasant to hear. It was like two pieces of wood hitting each other or rocks hitting each other. The flying leopard beast shook its head and wagged its tail. Its eyes revealed an extremely painful expression. Seeing that the sound wave was effective, Jen Qing moved her fingers again. She wanted to completely defeat the flying leopard beast. Unfortunately, in the span of a few breaths, the winged leopard's body had expanded by more than 30%. Following another strong flash of light from the winged leopard, a series of crackling sounds rang in their minds. The soundless wave that trapped the winged leopard with Serenity Seeker had exploded. With a pu sound, a mouthful of blood spurted out from Jen Qing's mouth. She seemed to have been injured because her mystic instrument's attack had been broken. Seeing that it was free, the flying leopard beast let out another roar. It spread its wings and charged towards Jen Qing like a shadow. Jen Qing was caught off guard. She quickly dodged and pointed her finger. Serenity Seeking drew an arc in front of her. Jen Qing barely dodged the flying leopard beast. However, the flying leopard beast's tail swung in mid-air and unexpectedly hit Jen Qing's waist. The tail swung through the spiritual energy in the air and made a sob sound. Needless to say, the strength of the tail was definitely impressive. If Jen Qing was hit, it was hard to say what would happen. Flying and speed were definitely not Jen Qing's strong points. Just dodging the flying leopard beast's attack was already difficult enough. The flying leopard beast's attack put Jen Qing in a difficult position. Sigh. Jen Qing sighed. In a hurry, she pointed her finger at Serenity Seeking again. The magic weapon descended a few feet and blocked the flying leopard beast's tail. At the same time, Jen Qing hurriedly circulated her magic power and wanted to increase the glow of the protection. The flying leopard beast's tail seemed to have eyes. When it swung its tail in front of Serenity Seeking, it actually swept past the bottom of Serenity Seeking and hit Jen Qing's waist. With a loud paw sound, Jen Qing's body was sent flying by the flying leopard beast's tail. At the same time, the glow at his waist flickered rapidly and flickered a few times. His defense was also about to be destroyed. Good heavens, this is an Aurus Core stage cultivator. Xiao Hua, who was watching from afar, was shocked. He thought to himself, I wonder what rank this flying leopard beast is. It actually has such great strength and is so arrogant. Just as he was thinking, the flying leopard beast's vigorous body made a beautiful turn in the air. Its pair of green eyes emitted a flirtatious light as it looked at Xiao Hua's thunder ship. Oh no! Xiao Hua was shocked. Even without his reminder, Zhen Yu was already flustered. Under the circulation of her magic power, the thunder ship did not dare to stop. It looked for a direction and fled in panic. Wu, seeing the thunder ship fly away, the flying leopard beast let out a long roar. Its body flashed again and it flapped its wings, chasing after the thunder ship at an even faster speed than before. Even with Jen Qing's speed, she could not outrun the flying leopard beast. How could Zhen Yu escape with the thunder ship? In just a few breaths, the flying leopard beast had caught up to the edge of the thunder ship. This time, the flying leopard beast did not overturn the thunder ship. Instead, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws, grabbing at an aura refining stage cultivator on the thunder ship. At the same time, the flying leopard beast's tail that sent Zhen Qing flying once again swung from behind and struck the thunder ship. The lightning ship was protected by a talisman. However, the talisman was extremely thin under the tremendous strength of the winged leopard beast. The winged leopard beast's tail slashed through the light, and the hurricane in the air poured into the lightning ship, blowing everyone into the air. Everyone had already planned for this. Once the defense was broken, they would activate their flying talismans and flee in panic, fearing that the flying leopard beast would find them. At the same time, the entire thunderbolt also swayed and fell rapidly from the sky. Xiao Hua was naturally not an exception. His flying speed was extremely fast. Even if the other 20 disciples were attacked by the flying leopard beast, it might not be his turn. Moreover, the person that the flying leopard beast attacked was far away from him at the other end of the thunder ship. It was enough for Xiao Hua to escape. However, just as Xiao Hua's figure flew into the air, preparing to flee, Xiao Hua unconsciously froze where his gaze landed. This flying leopard beast did not attack the 10 arrogant male and female disciples of the Qian and Kun lightning palaces. Instead, it chose to attack Sun Shu of the Sun Lightning Palace. At this moment, Sun Shu's face was ashen. A jade-like magic tool in his hand emitted a red luster, forming a shield-like defense. He was trying his best to block the flying leopard beast's sharp claws. In the eyes of the winged leopard, the red shield was like a pastry. A casual wave was enough to break it. Helpless, Sun Shu had no choice but to channel his transcendence energy with all his might to maintain the Dharma artifact. His figure could only hover in midair. At this moment, Zhen Qing had already stabilized herself in the distance. Seeing the flying leopard beast attacking Sun Shu's expression changed drastically. He pointed at Serenity Seeker beside him and Serenity Seeker followed him to the thunder ship. Zhen Yu, who was controlling the thunder ship, was in an even worse state. By the time he managed to stabilize the thunder ship, he was already far away from the flying leopard beast. It was already too late for him to move. What should I do? Xiao Hua thought to himself. Seeing that the light in Sun Shu's hand was getting dimmer and dimmer, Xiaohua knew that her transcendence energy would not be able to hold on for much longer. If not for the winged leopard destroying the shield playfully, Sun Shu would have long been killed by the sharp claws. Xiaohua calculated in his mind. He felt that his flying speed was slower than the flying leopard beast, but wasn't Zhen Qing right behind the flying leopard beast? If he hid behind Zhen Qing, he would have some confidence. Therefore, Xiaohua no longer hesitated. He activated the hibernating thunder escape and flew towards the flying leopard beast. Sun Shu's heart was like dead ashes. She did not expect the flying leopard beast to attack her. Moreover, her senior sister from Thunder Palace did not hesitate at all and had already escaped far away. She did not even have a helper. Actually, at this moment, she did not blame her senior sister Li. Even if their identities were switched, her first choice would probably be to be similar to her. However, when the flying leopard beast destroyed her magic weapon playfully, she felt a kind of sorrow as a cultivator, a kind of extreme desolation. The flying leopard beast in front of her stirred up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Sun Shu almost did not have the strength to breathe. The flying leopard beast quickly destroyed her magic weapon a few times and seemed to have lost its patience. It stretched out its sharp claws and the magic weapon in Sun Shu's hand was knocked away by a huge force. Before Sun Shu could take out her yellow talisman, the sharp claws had already touched her chest. One could imagine, in the blink of an eye, her beautiful curves would turn into blood. Sun Shu closed her eyes mournfully. Strangely, her heart was very calm. However, at this moment, Xiaohua arrived. Sun Shu felt a warm arm wrap around her waist. A somewhat familiar yet somewhat unfamiliar voice sounded in her ears. "Don't use your magic power." Then, a biting wind sounded in Sun Shu's ears. Immediately after, the flying leopard beast's furious roar was left behind her. Chapter 1598. Xiaohua used the hibernating thunder escape and grabbed Sun Shu's waist, saving her from the flying leopard's claws. Then, without stopping, he immediately flew away. However, even though Xiaohua's speed was extremely fast, the flying leopard's tail was even faster. A shadow flashed past and the flying leopard's tail, which was harder than an iron rod, attacked Xiaohua's waist from top to bottom. Xiaohua had already planned this when he flew over. The tip of the devil's spear in his hand was already ready. Seeing the flying leopard's tail attack, he immediately went up to meet it. Just like when he was dealing with Zhen Qing, the flying leopard's tail also swayed slightly, wanting to dodge the devil's spear. However, Xiaohua's wrist moved slightly and the devil's spear seemed to be attracted by the flying leopard's tail. With a slight tremble, a few other devil spear tips suddenly appeared and stabbed out with the flying leopard's tail. Paw! The flying leopard's tail hit the devil spear tip. A force that Xiaohua had never encountered before rushed into the devil spear tip. At this moment, Xiaohua's devil spear tip moved again. He actually used the devil spear tip to change the direction of the flying leopard's tail's attack and borrowed the force to fly towards Zhen Qing. This unforeseen event happened in a few breaths of time. The bystanders who were fleeing in panic didn't see it clearly. Only a few disciples who had flown away earlier occasionally released their divine sense and saw Xiaohua holding Sun Shu and flying to Zhen Qing's side. Zhen Qing was originally shocked, but when she saw Xiaohua suddenly fly out and was strangely sent flying to her side by the flying leopard beast, she was shocked, but at the same time, a relaxed expression appeared on her face. "Go!" Zhen Qing shouted. Netherseeker once again increased its speed. The sound waves on it wrapped around the flying leopard. At this moment, the flying leopard was somewhat irritable. Its head swayed rapidly as if it wasn't used to the sound attack. Immediately, the flying leopard's limbs stiffened. The soundless wave began to take effect. The flying leopard let out a long roar and suddenly expanded, charging towards Zhen Qing. Ah! Even though Zhen Qing wasn't afraid of the winged leopard, Xiao Hua and Sun Shu were by his side, so he couldn't help but protect them. Right at this moment, a voice resounded. "Fellow Daoist, who's up ahead?" Subsequently, a resounding cry of a bird resounded. Caw! The bird's chirp was extremely loud and clear, as if it could pierce through heaven and earth. The winged leopard beast stopped abruptly when it heard the chirp. It looked in the direction of the sound in shock before diving into the clouds below and flying underground without looking back. Someone's coming. Xiao Hua's heart was also beating violently. He was still in a state of shock, but when he heard the chirping of birds and human voices, he was overjoyed. He hurriedly let go of Sun Shu, allowing him to activate the flight talisman. He stood to the side with a complicated expression. Although Sun Shu knew that the danger had passed, she was the same as Xiao Hua, unable to immediately calm down. Her towering chest violently heaved up and down. "I am the Imperial Thunder Sect's Zhen Qing. May I know which fellow Daoist has arrived?" When Zhen Qing saw that the flying leopard had disappeared, he didn't chase after it. Instead, he pointed at the flying leopard above his head. He looked up with a trace of luck on his face. Layers of floating clouds in the distance were blown away by the hurricane. After the hurricane, an unbelievably large bird beast appeared in Xiao Hua's field of vision. The bird beast looked like an ibis. It had a slender neck and a slender beak. Its black and white feathers fluttered in the wind. Ah! Xiao Hua almost wanted to rub his eyes. He couldn't believe that it was so big. It was almost the same size as Zhen Qing's thunderbolt. On the back of the bird was a golden core old man with white hair and beard. He had his hands behind his back and was leisurely looking over. Howling Night Ibis. Zhen Qing's eyes narrowed as he shouted. He then looked around. At this moment, Zhenyu had already driven the thunderbolt into the air. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect who had scattered in all directions were also gathering here. "Are you a fellow Daoist from the Seven Skills Sect?" Zhen Qing transmitted his voice. "Ha ha ha, Thunderbolt. So it's a fellow Daoist from the Imperial Thunder Sect." The Golden Core Cultivator laughed loudly. The Howling Night Ibis spread its wings and stopped not too far away from Zhen Qing. "So it's fellow Daoist Wei Chongxi." Clearly, Zhen Qing was familiar with the Golden Core Cultivator. He had a faint smile on his face as he cupped his hands and smiled. "Huh, fellow Daoist Zhen. Are you also going to the Tai Ching sect to participate in the Feather Immortal Gathering? How come, did you encounter something here?" Wei Chongxi smiled as he looked at the thunderbolt behind Zhen Qing and the chi-refining disciples who were flying over from all directions. "I won't hide it from fellow Daoist Wei. Just now, a flying leopard suddenly attacked us. However, under the resistance of my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, the flying leopard was unable to escape," Zhen Qing said indifferently. "Ah! Flying leopard." Wei Chongxi pretended to be surprised and shouted, "That's a 5th-rank spiritual beast. Fellow Daoist Zhen, your strength is about the same as the flying leopard. However, you don't seem to be as fast as the flying leopard, right? You also don't have the tyrannical strength of the flying leopard, right?" Then, he looked at the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples curiously and said with grief, "Your sect's disciples didn't suffer any casualties?" Zhen Qing smiled and said, "Thanks to the Seven Skills Sect, your sect's Howling Night Ibis is also a 5th-rank spiritual beast." Its cry had already scared the flying leopard away. "The winged leopard beast is so powerful that it overturned your sect's thunderbolt. Even with fellow Daoist Zhen leading the way, the winged leopard beast couldn't be chased away. How could a mere guard beast of my Seven Skills Sect be able to chase it away?" Fellow Daoist Gen, you're exaggerating. Wei Chongxi was immensely proud. He lowered his head to look below and said, "This is the edge of Inkcloud Black Forest. It's a place where spiritual beasts roam. If fellow Daoist Gen doesn't mind, why don't we head to Tai Ching sect together?" Gen Qing pondered for a moment. He knew that there was a barrier between the Seven Skills sect and the Imperial Thunder sect. However, who could say that there wasn't a barrier between the Seven Skills sect and the Xuanyan school? No matter what, the two cultivation sects were from the country of Shi. Compared to the cultivation sects from the country of Mei and the country of Lian, they should have a common enemy. There shouldn't be any problems on the way to Tai Ching sect. Of course, the 5 cultivation sects of the country of Shi would often travel together. Therefore, Gen Qing only thought for a moment before cupping his hands and said, "Fellow Daoist Wei, since you're so kind, I wouldn't dare to refuse. Alright, then my 7 Skills sect will ride the Howling Night Ibis first and the Imperial Thunder sect will follow behind. As fellow Daoist wishes." Alright, Wei Chongxi didn't seem to move, but the whistling night ibis stopped in midair and let out a long cry. Its black and white wings suddenly flapped, and the several qi condensation cultivators on its back flew away in the blink of an eye, carrying the dozen or so peak 12th layer qi condensation cultivators. Gen Qing turned his head to look at Xiao Hua and waved his hand. "Let's go." Then, the 3 of them flew onto the thunderboat. After everyone boarded the thunderboat, Gen Qing personally took control and chased after the Howling Night Ibis. Sun Shu followed behind Xiao Hua and landed on the thunderboat. As soon as Xiao Hua touched the ground, he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to cultivate. Seeing this, Sun Shu hesitated. After a while, he said in a low voice, "Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, thank you for saving my life." Then, he didn't go far. Instead, he found a place around Xiao Hua and sat down cross-legged, cultivating diligently. The other 18 aura refining disciples were in stark contrast to the 2 of them. Among them, several had witnessed what happened just now and were whispering to the disciples they were familiar with. They'd naturally experienced Xiao Hua's flying speed, but it was still slower than the flying leopard. They couldn't understand why Xiao Hua would disregard his own life to save Sun Shu. Of course, with just a few words, everyone was like the people in the marketplace, using the words "beauty doesn't captivate people" to explain it. Naturally, Yuan Bo's expression became even more unsightly. Yuan Bo and Min Ji's thoughts didn't need to be said. They were both worldly disciples and could be considered second class in the Imperial Thunder sect. If they could find a female direct disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect to dual cultivate with, needless to say, they'd have a solid foundation in the Imperial Thunder sect in the future. Sun Shu and Xue Xue were both Sun Ming's disciples, and Sun Ming was a gold core cultivator. How could the 2 of them not be envious of such a backer? Not to mention that Sun Shu and Xue Xue were first-class beauties. Even if they were Wu Yan, the 2 of them would still cover their eyes with a handkerchief and recognize them as beauties. However, Xue Xue entered the Imperial Thunder sect with Xiao Hua and was previously treated coldly by Yuan Bo and the others. Although Min Gup felt that Xue Xue was close to Xiao Hua, when he thought about his appearance, his background, and his cultivation, he always felt a trace of luck in his heart. As for Yuan Bo, he had already separated from Min Gu and was eyeing Sun Shu. Although Sun Shu couldn't see any connection with Xiao Hua saved Sun Shu and Sun Shu was sitting close to Xiao Hua and cultivating like a little bird relying on a human. Yuan Bo already felt that something was wrong, so how could he not have any thoughts? On the contrary, Wang Yunxiao listened to everyone's discussion and looked at Yuan Bo's expression, but he didn't say a word. Xiao Hua sat on the thunderboat and released his Buddhist awareness. He slowly scanned the crowd and stopped around Gen Qing. Gen Qing didn't feel anything, she only released her divine sense to the maximum. She was constantly scanning the area, afraid that she would encounter another spirit beast surprise attack. Seeing that the gold core stage Zhen Qing couldn't sense his Buddhist awareness, Xiaohua was satisfied and withdrew his Buddhist awareness. Shortly after, he opened his eyes slightly and looked at Sun Shu, who was cultivating beside him. He then looked at the many disciples who were gesticulating and snorted coldly from his nose and started cultivating. Several days later, they saw the edge of the ink-cloud black forest and there were no more dangers. Exhausted, Zhen Qing handed over the thunderbolt to Zhenyu and sat beside Xiaohua. She took out a medicinal pill and swallowed it, closing her eyes to recover her magic power. After waiting for 2 hours, Zhen Qing opened her eyes and looked at Xiaohua. She transmitted her voice, "Xiaohua, what you used just now, was it the hibernating thunder escape?" Xiaohua opened his eyes, looked at Zhen Qing and nodded slightly. Seeing that Xiaohua confirmed her guess, Zhen Qing didn't feel happy. Instead, she was even more confused. The hibernating thunder escape was naturally not something that Xiaohua, an aura-refining disciple of the Thunderclap Palace, could successfully cultivate. However, Zhen Qing didn't ask too much. She smiled and transmitted her voice, "You're very good. I owe you a favor." Xiaohua shook his head slightly. After thinking for a moment, he said in a low voice, "If Grandmaster feels that it's inappropriate, then play another song for disciple." Chapter 1599. Ha ha ha, what's so difficult about that? Zhen Qing laughed loudly. She took out a flute and placed it next to her lips. A melodious tune once again flowed on the thunderbolt. Xiaohua smiled. He entered the space again with the rhythm of the tune. His body's true energy was also slowly circulating under the influence of the heavenly law's embodiment technique. After the tune ended, Zhen Qing stood up and released her divine sense. She said, "Disciples, we are now in Meng Empire. We will reach Taiqing sect in a few days. There is no danger in between. Cultivate more and strive to win glory for our Imperial Thunder sect in the Feather Immortal Gathering." "Yes, thank you for your teachings, martial ancestor," the disciples said in unison and closed their eyes to cultivate. Xiaohua's slightly opened eyes were filled with confusion. He muttered in his heart, "What's going on? Last time when martial ancestor Zhen played the tune, my cultivation increased rapidly. It's more than a month's worth of cultivation. But why didn't the tune have any effect? Forget it, forget it. Music is martial ancestor Zhen's cultivation method. It's enough that I can get some benefits. What else can I ask for?" Xiaohua closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. Although Sun Shu, who was beside Xiaohua, had been cultivating with her eyes closed, her mind was always in a mess. No matter what, she couldn't calm down. She couldn't cultivate at all. This was not surprising. Sun Shu had always lived in the Sunlei Palace. With Sun Ming, an Aurus Core stage cultivator, as her master, she had many privileges in the Imperial Thunder sect. Many people protected her and doted on her. Even if it was a routine training, there would always be disciples around to protect her. She had experienced the feeling of life and death before, but the coldness and self-preservation of others in the line of life and death shattered something in her heart. It made her understand what it meant to be heartless and to protect oneself. She was thinking and reflecting, so she couldn't cultivate in peace. Sure enough, in the next few days, the thunderbolt flew very smoothly. Every day, several 7-skill sect disciples with profound cultivation would come over to interact with the Imperial Thunder sect disciples. However, Xiaohua's cultivation was only at the early stage of qi refining stage, so he was never the center of attention. Most of the time, it was the disciples of the Qian and Kuan lightning palaces who came out to receive him. As for whether they sat together to chat or discuss their cultivation experiences, Xiaohua didn't care. On the other hand, Sun Shu was even colder than before. Occasionally, he would stand up and look at the scenery outside the thunderboat. His brows were slightly furrowed as if he had something on his mind. It must be because he suddenly saw the fickleness of human nature and found it hard to adapt, right? On this day, in front of the thunderboat, a fiery red sun rose from the east. Endless brilliance shone over the entire land. Under that red sun, 3 towering mountains stood in the sky. The Taiching sect is up ahead. Zhen Qing, who was standing at the edge of the thunderboat with her sleeves folded, was illuminated by the orange sunlight. There was an indescribable expression on her face. Hearing this, Xiaohua stopped cultivating and stood up. He walked to the edge of the thunderboat and looked as far as his eyes could see. The 3 mountains were like 3 pillars that supported the heavens and the earth, supporting the heaven and earth. It is said that when the heaven and earth were first created, there was a mass of chaos. A saint was born from the chaos and split the chaos. Yang was the heaven and the yin was the earth. Later on, afraid that the heaven and earth would merge, the saint created the heaven, earth, and human peaks to support the heaven and earth. The Taiching sect's heaven, earth, and human peaks boast that they are the pillars that the saint supports the heaven and earth. Seeing Xiaohua stand up and look, Zhen Qing said in a low voice, the Taiching sect itself is divided into the heaven sect, earth sect, and human sect. They are located in the 3 peaks. Martial ancestor, disciple has a question. Xiaohua stared at the mountain for a long time, then bowed and asked. Say it. Zhen Qing had a good impression of Xiaohua, so she said with a smile. Since it is the pillar that supports the heaven and earth, then just fly up and see if there is a peak on this mountain. Xiaohua blinked his eyes and said with a smile. Ha ha ha, Zhen Qing was stunned at first, then she clapped her hands and said, this idea is simple. But, do you think the Taiching sect's cultivators wouldn't think of it? Could it be, that this is really the pillar of heaven? Xiaohua's body shook, and he said in disbelief, but, disciple thinks that even if they want to support the heaven and earth, they can't be gathered together, right? Wouldn't it be better if they were scattered? Zhen Qing said unhappily, when did this old man say that this is the pillar of heaven? This is just the Taiching sect's boasting. Who would believe it? As for whether the heaven, earth, and human peaks have a peak or not, I'm afraid only the Taiching sect's cultivators know. Won't we know if we fly up and see? Xiaohua said casually. Zhen Qing said with a smile, Xiaohua, I'm afraid you haven't flown up to the sky before, right? Xiaohua was stunned, then he nodded and said, yes, why would disciple fly up to the sky for no reason? And then have you escaped underground before? Of course, Xiaohua answered honestly. Presumably, once you reach a certain depth, you won't be able to go any deeper, right? Zhen Qing said with a smile. Yes. Xiaohua nodded, then said, according to what martial ancestors said, flying to the heavens is also ordinary. And, that's right, the sky isn't as calm as you think. Above us, there are astral winds, thunder winds, heavenly winds, and so on. The higher we go, the more profound our cultivation is. Who would take the risk to see whether the 3 peaks have a peak? Xiaohua never thought that the azure sky above his head would have so many dangers. He was shocked, but he bowed and said, many thanks for martial ancestors' teachings. And Zhen Qing waved her hand and said with a smile, you have the hidden fire physique, so your true qi is the hardest to control. Your state of mind is very important. Remember that there is always a sky above the sky, and there will always be someone better than you. While she was talking, the whistling night ibis flying in front of the thunderboat suddenly cried out, and that sharp cry once again resounded through the sky. This thing. Did it run into another spirit beast? After several days of observation, Xiaohua knew that the whistling night ibis loved to fight. Whenever a spirit beast appeared nearby, it would cry out in protest. If it weren't for the 7 skills sect's disciples restraining it, it would have already fought several rounds. Roar! Just as the whistling night ibis cried out, a dragon's roar that was many times more majestic than a bird's cry came from the Tai Ching sect. Although the dragon's roar was very far away, it sounded like it was ringing in Xiaohua's heart. The magic power around Xiaohua's body suddenly froze, and he couldn't move his body. Little White. Xiaohua was delighted. This dragon's roar sounded very familiar. Immediately, the dragon transformation art that Xiaohua had been cultivating in his meridians sped up. His true qi flowed through his meridians, and the magic power in his body began to flow again. He looked at Zhen Qing, who was beside him, and frowned. She glanced at Zhen Yu, who was controlling the thunderboat, and found that he wasn't affected much. The thunderboat sank a few feet, then flew up again. But the 7 skills sect disciples in the distance were in a miserable state. Obviously, the dragon's roar was targeted at the whistling night ibis. Wherever the dragon's roar went, the whistling night ibis was immediately bound and fell from the sky like a rock. The 7 skills sect's 2 main disciples, Wei Chongxi and Qing Xiang, used their magic power to break free from the bindings. The 2 of them flew into the sky, but the other dozen or so qi refining disciples were in a miserable state. They fell from the sky like the whistling night ibis. Go quickly. Seeing this, Zhen Qing's face was expressionless. She urged her magic power and the entire thunderboat flew towards where the 7 skills sect disciples fell. Wei Chongxi and Qing Xiang couldn't take care of all the disciples, so they could only catch 3 or 4 of them. The others were still falling. Evil creatures. Just as the Imperial Thunder sect's thunderboat caught a few disciples, a fiery red dragon that was dozens of feet long flew over from the distant horizon. A furious roar came from the dragon's head. Roar! Another dragon's roar resounded through the heavens and earth. Everyone felt their bodies become lighter and their magic power could be used again. Not only were the dozen or so disciples lifted into the air in a panic, the whistling night ibis also struggled to stabilize themselves. After everyone calmed down, the fiery red dragon also flew in front of everyone. Sigh, too bad it's not Little White. Looking at the huge dragon's head not far away, Xiaohua was a bit disappointed. This dragon's head didn't seem to be comparable to Little White. The dragon's head was clearly visible, but it was more like a snake's head. There was only a single horn protruding from the top of the snake's head, and there was also a hint of a dragon's horn. Then there were the 2 faint dragon whiskers that grew from the sides of the snake's mouth. Looking at the dragon's body that was dozens of feet thick, the scales on its body had just taken the shape of dragon scales. There were also 3 dragon claws that were smaller than an infant's fish that had just grown out from its abdomen. Is this how the Tai Ching sect treats their guests? Wei Chongxi was enraged. He flew in front of the dragon and stared at the golden core cultivator on the dragon's head as he shouted. I am the Tai Ching sect's Dao Qing. Greetings, a fellow Daoist from the 7 Possibilities sect. On the dragon's head was a middle-aged cultivator. 3 strands of long beard fluttered in the wind. He had a very calm expression as he bowed and spoke. However, at this moment, the dragon once again displayed its might. It raised its head to the sky and roared. Its body flew, and its huge dragon head entered the 7 Possibilities sect and the Imperial Thunder sect. Only when the dragon's head touched the Imperial Thunder sect's thundership did it stop. Ah! The Imperial Thunder sect's people were shocked. They trembled in fear and didn't dare to move. Xiaohua's heart also turned cold. He immediately stopped cultivating the dragonization art. The dragon's head that was several times bigger than the thundership was touching the edge of the thundership. The snake's eyes, which looked even bigger than Xiaohua's, were emotionless. It coldly scanned the people on the thundership. As if it didn't find anything, it suddenly hissed and flicked its tongue left and right on the thunder ship. Although Xiaohua was very close to Little White in the past, the dragon's fierce aura enveloped the entire thunder ship. The snake's tongue seemed to be an extremely powerful magic tool. As long as it touched it, it could crush him into meat paste. How? How could he dare to move? Daoist Dao Qing, what is the meaning of this? Zhen Qing naturally didn't dare to move under the dragon's might. She shouted in a deep voice. Evil creature. Dao Qing clapped his hand and a strange jade rui appeared in his hand. He activated his magic power and waved it slightly. The dragon shook its head as if it was very unwilling. However, it couldn't disobey the jade rui's command. It could only open its mouth, raise its head, and fly back. Chapter 1600. Xiaohua was currently under the snake's head. The fishy smell from the snake's mouth made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He thought to himself, damn it, Little White's mouth seems to be very fragrant. Why is this thing so disgusting? Dao Qing restrained the python dragon and stood on the dragon's head. He bowed and said, I wonder which fellow Daoist from the Imperial Thunder sect has graced my Taiqing sect with your presence. I am Zhen Qing. Zhen Qing returned the greeting. All right, I'll let fellow Daoist Zhen Qing know that the python dragon of my sect has never acted recklessly. Just now, it was the Seven Skills sect's howling night ibis that provoked my sect. The python dragon ignored Ai's restraint and flew out. As for why it came to visit your sect's thunderboat, I don't know either. However, no matter what, it has disturbed your sect's disciples. My Taiqing sect will compensate. I will immediately report this matter to the deacon when I return to the sect. I hope fellow Daoist Zhen and the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect can understand. When Dao Qing said this, his voice wasn't very soft. Naturally, the disciples of the Seven Skills sect could hear him. Wei Chongxi originally wanted to aggressively demand an explanation from the Taiqing sect. However, after listening to Dao Qing's words, he realized that it wasn't right. How could he blame the Taiqing sect's python dragon? How could he not know the temper of his own spirit beast? A few days ago, he was showing off his spirit beast in front of the Imperial Thunder sect's disciples. Who would have thought that he would run into a hard nut today? The Seven Skills sect's face was completely destroyed. Several of their disciples were even saved by the Imperial Thunder sect's thunderboat. After Dao Qing finished speaking, he glanced at Wei Chongxi. Seeing that he didn't intend to pursue the matter, he continued, this year, my Taiqing sect is holding the Feather Immortal Gathering. We've specially set the venue on the Flying Sky Peak. Everyone, please wait for a moment. I will summon my disciples and send everyone to the Flying Sky Peak. After he finished speaking, he sent out a yellow talisman. A moment later, a red-crowned crane flew over. On the red-crowned crane stood a mid-stage Foundation establishment disciple. Dao Jing, send the fellow Daoists from the country of Shi's Seven Skills sect and the Imperial Thunder sect to the Flying Sky Peak. Dao Qing instructed. Yes, disciple obeys. Dao Jing steered the crane and led the way. Zhen Qing and Wei Chongxi cupped their hands at Dao Qing and bid him farewell. They steered the thunderboat and the howling night ibis to follow the crane. Dao Qing stood on the python dragon and frowned as he watched everyone disappear. The actions of the python dragon today were indeed suspicious. Ignoring the fact that the provocation of the howling night ibis could make the python dragon fly out of the abyss of cultivation, just the fact that the python dragon had stuck its head onto the thunderboat of the Imperial Thunder sect disciples made him even more suspicious. Could it be that the thunder-controlling sect's thunderboat has something that the python dragon is interested in? But that's not right. It seems that the boa dragon didn't pay much attention to the thunderboat after that. Unfortunately, the eyes of the dragon under Dao Qing's feet were slightly closed, as if it was asleep. Dao Qing didn't know how to ask, so after a while, he stomped his feet again. The dragon turned around and flew back to the Tai Ching sect. Xiao Hua and the others steered the thunderboat and followed Dao Jing's crane to the west. At this moment, Wei Chongxi was somewhat listless and no longer had his previous arrogance. The 7 skills sect disciples didn't return to the Howling Night Ibis's back and only stayed on the Imperial Thunder sect's thunderboat to chat with the disciples they were familiar with. In just a short moment, a small mountain floating in the air appeared before everyone's eyes. Countless clouds lingered below the small mountain. Although they still couldn't see the scenery above the small mountain clearly, just this scene alone made them feel like they were in a fairyland. The Yen Thunder Palace's Yen Thunder Palace was in the air. The Imperial Thunder sect disciples had seen it before, but it was only a palace. At a glance, they knew it was created by the Imperial Thunder sect's ancestors. The Tai Ching sect's small mountain was very large. There was no need to mention its weight. If it was created by the Tai Ching sect cultivators, how powerful would their divine ability be? However, if Golden Core cultivators like Zhen Qing swept their divine sense over it and didn't see any spiritual energy fluctuations, they would think that the small mountain was created by the gods. Then, who would believe it? Xiao Hua was dumbfounded like everyone else. He also stared at the huge mountain in a daze. When they got closer, they saw that the small mountain was indeed floating in the air abruptly. There was no place below it that was in contact with the ground. Thousands of clouds gathered and dissipated from time to time under the small mountain. It was no different from what they usually saw. Within the clouds, on the small mountain, there were green pine trees and green bamboos. The green mountains and clear waters reflected each other. Not long after, there were deer and young rabbits running away in a panic, startling the birds and beasts resting by the stream. The movement made people feel relaxed and happy. As expected of the Tai Ching sect. Such a quiet place is a good place to cultivate. Xiao Hua looked envious and sighed secretly. Seniors, this is where the Tai Ching sect's disciples usually cultivate. It's called the Bright Realm. Because the Feather Immortal Gathering this time is related to the Bright Realm, my sect master specially held the Feather Immortal Gathering in the Bright Realm. Dao Qing held a horsetail whisk in his hand. He swung it naturally and said with a smile. When Zhen Qing heard this, she felt a little strange. She frowned and said, "The Feather Immortal Gathering is held once every 10 years. This year, it's the Tai Ching sect's turn. What does it have to do with the Bright Realm?" "Ha, I'm going to keep you in suspense." Dao Jing smiled proudly and said, "When the Feather Immortal Gathering is held, Senior Zhen will naturally know." "Humph," Wei Chongxi snorted coldly and said, "It's just an illusion. Who doesn't have it?" Dao Jing had a good temper and didn't argue. He raised his hand and sent out a communication talisman. Then, he smiled and said, "Seniors, please." Just as he said the word please, another signal flew into the sky from the southwest. What a coincidence today. 3 sects came in a row. Dao Jing looked at the signal and turned to ask Zhen Qing and Wei Chongxi, "Seniors, do you want to go to the Bright Realm first or wait here for a while?" Zhen Qing glanced at Wei Chongxi and said, "I think we should wait here for a while. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if we have to greet them after entering the Bright Realm." "I have the same idea," Wei Chongxi said with a smile. As they were talking, a snow-white crane flew over from the southwest. Behind the crane, there was a dazzling phoenix boat that broke through the clouds in the sky and slowly flew over. "Are you kidding me?" When Xiao Hua saw the phoenix boat, he had a strange feeling. My Imperial Thunder sect has 20 disciples. 1 lightning boat is enough. This phoenix boat is probably several times bigger than the lightning boat. This sect has 50 to 60 disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering. What's there to see? In the country of Xi, the country of Meng, and the country of Lian, other than the Huanhua sect, who else would be so bored? There are less than 20 disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering. Why would they send such a big phoenix boat? Wei Chongxi snorted and said in a low voice. Huanhua sect. When Xiaohua heard this, he was overjoyed and his eyes lit up. If Fairy Hongxia had joined the Huanhua sect, it would have been several years. With Fairy Hongxia's talent, even if she hadn't reached the late stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refining stage, she would at least be in the middle stage of the 12th layer of the Qi refining stage. She would most likely be qualified to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. When he thought of Fairy Hongxia, Xiaohua's heaven-like beauty immediately appeared in his mind. The phoenix boat was very big and flew very slowly. When it stopped, there were indeed only a dozen disciples that flew down from the phoenix boat. The one in front was a golden core stage cultivator. When he looked behind the golden core stage cultivator, he saw that the dozen disciples were all handsome men and beautiful women. They were all talents. Fairy Hongxia. At the front of the dozen disciples, wasn't it the peerless Fairy Hongxia? Fellow Taoist Wei, fellow Taoist Zhen, I greet you. The golden core stage cultivator at the front also had long eyebrows and a sharp nose. He had a jade-like aura. So it's fellow Taoist Xiong Fei. It's been so many years since we last met, you're still as magnificent as ever. At this moment, Wei Chongxi's face changed into a smile as he went up to greet them. Zhen Qing also went up and cupped his hands in greeting. Xiaohua did not care about what the three golden core stage cultivators were saying. His gaze was always on Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia still had that cold look on her face. Her brows were slightly furrowed and she looked straight ahead, not looking at anyone else. Perhaps because Xiaohua had been staring at her for too long, Fairy Hongxia sensed something. She turned her head slightly and her gaze swept towards Xiaohua. Dong dong dong, Xiaohua's heart thumped. She's about to see me. However, when Fairy Hongxia's gaze swept past Xiaohua, it was as though Xiaohua was a stranger. She did not seem to stop. It can't be. Xiaohua's heart turned cold. Just as Xiaohua was feeling disappointed, Fairy Hongxia's face froze. Her gaze immediately swept back. When she saw Xiaohua's face clearly, her two eyes unconsciously widened. She actually stared at Xiaohua's face and stared. In her eyes was a trace of surprise and a trace of disbelief. Junior sister Hongxia, let's go. At this moment, a handsome figure stood between Xiaohua and Fairy Hongxia. He said to Fairy Hongxia with concern. Xiaohua frowned. When he saw the person's appearance, he was stunned. He naturally knew this person. It was Yun Guichong, the person he saw when he participated in the Huanhua sect's disciple selection. This guy is also at the peak of Qi refining stage level 12. Xiaohua sighed inwardly, I actually forgot about this person. That day, Kaizhuxia said that this guy covets Fairy Hongxia. Thinking that Yun Guichong and Fairy Hongxia were from the same sect, Xiaohua could not help but feel sour in his heart. At this moment, the leaders of the three sects had already greeted each other. They spoke as they flew forward. Yun Guichong called Fairy Hongxia to follow behind Xiong Fei. Fairy Hongxia retracted her gaze and nodded slightly. She walked away without looking at Xiaohua again. Beside Fairy Hongxia, Yun Guichong followed closely. The other disciples of the Huanhua sect were 2 steps behind them. This is. Seeing Yun Guichong being so intimate with Fairy Hongxia, and then looking at Fairy Hongxia who did not look back, Xiaohua's heart ached. It was as if the dream in his heart had suddenly shattered. And after it shattered, it revealed his own delusion. Sigh, everything is just my delusion. Xiaohua laughed bitterly. I only met her once and did her a favor. Moreover, she has already given me the reward. What else am I thinking? It's impossible for a toad to eat swan meat. Chapter 1601. Thinking about it, Xiaohua had only met Fairy Hongxia once in the Kai family of Liang. Even though she had the intention to protect him at that time, it was because he had sent Kai Zhuxia's corpse back home. At that time, he was just a mediocre fourth-layer qi refining cultivator. How could he enter Fairy Hongxia's eyes? Now, even though Xiaohua had already become a 12th-layer qi refining cultivator and was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, but, among the dozens of cultivators in front of him, which one of them did not have a higher cultivation than Xiaohua? Which sect did not have a stronger background than Xiaohua? After thinking about it, Xiaohua's interest waned. His head drooped and he looked very listless as he walked behind the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect, waiting to enter the Bright Realm. Dao Jing and the cultivator who had led the disciples of the Huanhua sect over just now each took out a yellow talisman from their bosoms and activated their magic power. The yellow talisman let out a clear cry and spiraled up like a flying crane. It was thrown into the Bright Realm in midair. Immediately, there was a soft, danged sound like the sound of a bell. Between the white clouds at the bottom of the Bright Realm, there was a 5-colored brilliance. Every brilliance condensed into a bridge, slowly extending to the feet of everyone. Seniors, please. Dao Jing cupped his hands and said. He was the first to step onto the Bridge of Light. Just like how he entered the Yanlei Palace, the Bridge of Light slowly shrank and pulled Dao Jing's figure into the white clouds. As Dao Jing stepped onto the Bridge of Light, Zhen Qing, Wei Chongxi, Xiong Fei, and the others looked at each other. They also took a step forward and entered the Bridge of Light. The Bridge of Light was not fast and there was no defensive brilliance on it. Xiaohua's figure slowly rose along with the Bridge of Light. The strong mountain wind blew his clothes up. His heart that had been heated up just now gradually cooled down. He raised his eyes and looked at the Bridge of Light that was not too far away from him. Fairy Hongxia and Yin Zhichong were almost completely leaning against each other. Xiaohua's mouth revealed a trace of a bitter smile. This Yin Zhichong is a man of striking appearance. Not only is he a talent in cultivation, he is also from a cultivator's family. Now they are even fellow disciples of the same sect. What am I? I am just a rogue cultivator. Even if. Sigh, what am I thinking? He was just a toad. Even if you have a bit of a cultivation base, when Kai Zhuxia met Li Zongbao, the two of them clearly had feelings for each other. However, because of certain things, neither of them could confide in the other. How could the matters of the world be resolved simply by mutual love? Xiaohua was in a bad mood, so the bystanders naturally ignored him. However, Sun Shu, who was not far from him, could see clearly. Sun Shu was very curious about Xiaohua. From Shueishue's mouth, Sun Shu knew that Shueishue relied on Xiaohua to pass the disciple selection. Sun Shu originally thought that Xiaohua and Shueishue had some kind of relationship, but when he heard that the two had only met twice, he couldn't help but be surprised. Although Sun Shu didn't have much experience in the outside world, he had heard from many disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect that the disciple selection process was very cruel. Even blood brothers had to be separated, let alone strangers. Of course, what Sun Shu was most dissatisfied with was Xiaohua's cultivation level. He actually advanced from the middle of the 10th layer to the early stage of the 12th layer in such a short time. This was simply impossible for a loose cultivator in her impression. A few days ago, Xiaohua actually risked his life to save her from the claws of the flying leopard beast. This made her thoroughly recognize Xiaohua's true colors. This person was indeed different from other cultivators. He seems to be really mysterious. Sun Shu stole a glance at the unwell Xiaohua and thought, the flying technique he used before was different from the one he used in the illusion. It seems to be the lightning evasion technique. He's only a cultivator at the early stage of the 12th layer, how could he practice the lightning evasion technique? Ha! He looks very dispirited. What's going on? When everyone reached the bright realm, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth that assaulted their faces shook their spirits. The spiritual chi here was more than twice as dense as what they usually saw. Xiong Fei released his divine sense and took a look. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Dao Jing, why is the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the bright realms so dense? There doesn't seem to be any spirit veins nearby. Indeed, the formations around the bright realm don't have any traces of spirit gathering. I am also very surprised." Wei Chongxi also said while twirling his beard. Ha! Could it be that Senior Wei is also a formation expert? I've been disrespectful. Dao Jing didn't answer in a hurry and instead asked in surprise. Wei Chongxi had a trace of pride on his face. He smiled and said, "Not at all, not at all. I only learned a little from my sect's martial uncle for a few days." Hearing this, not to mention Dao Jing, even Zhen Qing, Xiong Fei, and the others had a trace of admiration on their faces. That's right, the study of formations wasn't something that ordinary cultivators could come into contact with. On the Daybreak continent, talisman masters, pill masters, and tool refiners were already scarce, not to mention masters who were proficient in even more profound formations. Xiaohua stood behind everyone and suddenly understood why the Deacon of Lightning Hall didn't dare to disturb the sect's formation master when he closed the formation in the eastern ridge. This made her thoroughly recognize Xiaohua's true colors. This person was indeed different from other cultivators. He seems to be really mysterious. Sun Shu stole a glance at the unwell Xiaohua and thought, the flying technique he used before was different from the one he used in the illusion. It seems to be the lightning evasion technique. He's only a cultivator at the early stage of the 12th layer, how could he practice the lightning evasion technique? Ha! He looks very dispirited. What's going on? When everyone reached the bright realm, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth that assaulted their faces shook their spirits. The spiritual chi here was more than twice as dense as what they usually saw. Xiong Fei released his divine sense and took a look. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Dao Jing, why is the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the bright realms so dense? There doesn't seem to be any spirit veins nearby. Indeed, the formations around the bright realm don't have any traces of spirit gathering. I am also very surprised." Wei Chongxi also said while twirling his beard. Ha! Could it be that Senior Wei is also a formation expert? I've been disrespectful. Dao Jing didn't answer in a hurry and instead asked in surprise. Wei Chongxi had a trace of pride on his face. He smiled and said, "Not at all, not at all. I only learned a little from my sect's martial uncle for a few days." Hearing this, not to mention Dao Jing, even Zhen Qing, Xiong Fei, and the others had a trace of admiration on their faces. That's right, the study of formations wasn't something that ordinary cultivators could come into contact with. On the Daybreak continent, talisman masters, pill masters, and tool refiners were already scarce, not to mention masters who were proficient in even more profound formations. Xiaohua stood behind everyone and suddenly understood why the Deacon of Lightning Hall didn't dare to disturb the sect's formation master when he closed the formation in the eastern ridge. The three seniors are really knowledgeable. Dao Jing quickly praised, "This bright realm is a magic treasure left behind by the founder of the Tai Ching sect. Because it can gather the spiritual aura of heaven and earth, it was placed here as a place for the disciples of the Tai Ching sect to cultivate. This is actually a magic treasure." Not only Xiao Hua, but all the disciples who practiced qi were also surprised. They all lowered their heads and released their divine senses. However, just like before, the ground was like an ordinary ground. Their divine senses passed through it, and they couldn't find anything wrong with it. Only Zhen Qing and the other two golden core cultivators carefully observed it and didn't frown. Such a big magic treasure. What is it used for? Could it be used to smash people? Xiao Hua stomped his feet and thought to himself, then, how much strength does it have? Oh, it shouldn't be strength, it should be magic power. Oh my, what cultivation level does the senior have to have so much magic power? What a powerful divine will. Seniors, the plaza where the Feather Immortal Assembly is held is at the center of the Bright Realm. Please follow me. Dao Jing and the others looked at it for a moment, then cupped their hands and flew up with everyone. The Bright Realm was really big. After flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, a flat ground that was several hundred feet wide appeared in front of them. This flat ground seemed to be the peak of a small mountain. It was abnormally flat. There was a huge protrusion on the east side of the flat ground, which was blocked by a restriction. They couldn't see what was inside, but other places were normal. There were countless pavilions around the flat ground. At this moment, some disciples were sitting leisurely inside, meditating or talking. Seniors, this is where the disciples of the Tai Ching sect usually cultivate. The Feather Immortal Assembly in 2 days will be held here. The resting places for the disciples of each sect have already been arranged. Dao Jing landed on the flat ground and pointed. Chapter 1602. What's this? Looking at the ordinary flat ground, Xiong Fei's gaze naturally fell on the east side that was covered by the forbidden spell and casually asked. This. Forgive me for keeping you guessing. Dao Jing also said casually. However, as soon as he said that, everyone had a faint smile on their faces. Dao Jing immediately felt that it was inappropriate. He blushed slightly and smiled apologetically. This thing is related to the Feather Immortal Gathering. I can't let you see it for now. You'll know everything when the Feather Immortal Gathering starts. Could it be an ambush? Xiao Hua thought to himself. Xiong Fei's expression also turned serious. He said vigilantly, "Your Tai Ching sect. Could it be that you have other ideas?" Dao Jing smiled bitterly and cupped his hands. "Senior Xiong, please be careful with your words. All the famous sects in the 3 kingdoms are participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering. How could my Tai Ching sect dare to do anything?" "Humph, I don't think you dare." Xiong Fei waved his hand. However, his gaze did not leave the restrictive spell. He had been using his divine thought to scan the restrictive spell. Unfortunately, the restrictive spell was very strong. No matter how Xiong Fei looked, he could not see what was inside. Of course, Xiao Hua and the others were also curious. Are the same sects participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering? Wei Chongxi looked away from the restrictive spell and looked at the disciples in different clothes in the pavilion. He said softly, "Which sects are not here?" Dao Jing smiled. "Of course, it's still the same sections. Your country's Shanghua sect and Xuanyan sect, Lian country's Utopia sect, Xian Tian sect, Kunlun sect, and Nanming sect. My country's Changbai sect, Immortal Ascension sect, and Xianla sect. My country's 3 sects are close. I'm afraid they will only be here tomorrow. As for the other sects, other than Lian country's Kunlun sect, Nanming sect, and your country's Shanghua sect, all the other sects came yesterday." Then, Dao Jing hesitated for a moment and said softly, also. I seem to have heard. There's another sect participating. However, I don't know which sect it is. There are other sects. Zhen Qing, Wei Chongxi, and Xiong Fei looked at each other in surprise. It's not that I'm keeping you in suspense. I really don't know. Perhaps, we'll be able to see the results in the next 2 days. Dao Jing muttered. I've said so much. Actually, there are a total of 13 sections. Only the Xuanyan sect, the Utmost Happiness sect, and the Xian Tian sect are present. Including the Imperial Thunder sect, the Qiqiao sect, and the Huanhua sect, we don't even have half of them. Xiaohua glanced at Hongxia Fairy, who had a cold expression on her face. Xiaohua pondered in his heart, Utopia faction. I wonder which senior from the Utopia faction is here. It's a pity that Li Zongbao has only built his foundation a few years ago. No matter how much of a genius he is, it's impossible for him to enter the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. I'm afraid he won't be able to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Do they all live here too? Zhen Qing raised her eyebrows and asked, May I know who their masterminds are? I would like to pay them a visit. Alright, Senior Zhen, please no. The Xuanyan sect Senior Jiang Changhong, the Xian Tian sect Senior Jing Haojing, and the Utmost Happiness faction's Senior Ku Huichou. Dao Jing thought for a while and said, however, Senior Ku from the Utmost Happiness faction went to visit a good friend at the Human Spiritual Peak yesterday and hasn't returned yet. Only their deputy, Li Zongbao, is here. If Senior Zhen wants to pay a visit to Senior Ku, I'll send a messaging charm to you. Zhen Qing smiled and waved her hand, there's no need. Although we know each other, there's no need to send a messaging charm. We'll go and have a look together later. Great, hearing Dao Jing's words, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He didn't know how to pass on the message that Kai Zhuxia had entrusted to him to Li Zongbao. Now that they were all here to participate in the Feather Immortal Conference, wasn't this the best opportunity? I'll tell Li Zongbao about this matter and I'll have a perfect explanation for Kai Zhuxia. Sigh, beautiful women have short lives. Isn't this the case? Xiaohua looked at Fairy Hongxia in the distance and couldn't help but think of Kai Zhuxia's lifelike face lying in the green stone coffin. Seniors and fellow cultivators, according to the rules of the Feather Immortal Conference, the resting places of each faction are not in the same place. Moreover, each faction is separated by a spell array. Only people with their own magic tokens can enter and leave freely. The spell array of each faction doesn't prevent messaging charms. If you want to go to another faction, you can use your messaging charms. Only when the spell array is open can you enter freely. As Dao Jing spoke, he passed the magic tokens of each faction to the deputies of the 3 factions. In addition, when you're resting, please stay in this pavilion. It's best not to go too far from other places. Dao Jing thought for a while and said, the Bright Realm is the place where the disciples of the Taiqing sect cultivate. There are also places for training. They all rely on the power of magic treasures. Many places are not easy to control. If any of you want to go out and sightsee, you can ask the disciples of the Taiqing sect to lead the way. If you go out without permission and meet with any trouble, the Taiqing sect can't bear the responsibility. I know. Every year, the Feather Immortal Conference uses the same old method. Who doesn't know? Xiong Fei waved his hand and said. That's good. I'll return to the mountain to report. Seniors, please rest early. Tomorrow, at the Yi Gathering, the Taiqing sect will send some foundation establishment and Qi refinement disciples over to exchange information with you. After Dao Jing finished speaking, he waved his hand and said to a few Qi refinement level 7 and 8 disciples who had flown over, bring the seniors and senior brothers of each faction to rest. There's a gathering tomorrow. Xiao Hua was delighted when he heard that. He hadn't been to the gathering for a long time and missed the time in Jingbei City. It seems that I have to refine more fireball charms tonight. Xiao Hua thought to himself. However, just as this thought arose, Xiao Hua scolded himself secretly. How stupid. Exchanging fireball charms with others and letting others use my own fireball charms to hit myself. The resting place of the Imperial Thunder sect was naturally different from the Huanhua sect. Xiao Hua and Fairy Hongxia went their separate ways, and Fairy Hongxia didn't even look at Xiao Hua from the beginning to the end. The Imperial Thunder sect was allocated a row of rather large pavilions. There were many rooms, and each room had a restriction. One could only enter with the corresponding magic tablet. Xiao Hua held the magic tablet that Zhen Yu had given him and found his quiet room. Wang Yunxiao's quiet room was right next to Xiao Hua's. Seeing Xiao Hua open the restriction, Wang Yunxiao smiled and said, "That's good. I still have some cultivation insights that I want to share with junior brother Xiao. Can you come to my room later? I'm afraid I don't have time today. I still have other things to do. Let's wait for tomorrow." Xiao Hua shook his head and said. Wang Yunxiao was surprised and asked, "Isn't this junior brother Xiao's first time in the Taiqing sect?" "Hee, of course it's my first time in the Taiqing sect." Xiao Hua smiled and didn't answer Wang Yunxiao's question directly. He stepped into the quiet room and opened the restriction casually. Seeing Xiao Hua walk into the quiet room, Wang Yunxiao narrowed his eyes and stared at the door of the quiet room thoughtfully for a moment. Then he also entered his quiet room. However, Wang Yunxiao didn't close the door of his quiet room, nor did he open the restriction. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Xiao Hua came out of his quiet room. He glanced at Wang Yunxiao's quiet room and stepped out of the row of pavilions where the Imperial Thunder sect was located. Naturally, there were qi refining disciples of the Taiqing sect in front of the pavilions. Xiao Hua asked for the location of the pavilion where the Utopia faction was located and went without saying. After Xiao Hua's figure disappeared, Wang Yunxiao also came out of the pavilion. He cupped his hands and smiled at the disciple who was on duty. "Where did my junior brother go just now? The deputy leader of my sect has something to ask him." That disciple was only at level 6 of the qi refining stage. He didn't dare to ignore Wang Yunxiao's question. He bowed respectfully and said, "Just now, my senior brother asked about the location of the Utopia faction. It seems that he is also going to the Utopia faction. Senior brother, you can send a message to him. If it is inconvenient for you, I can help you find him." Forget it. I'm afraid he is going to look for an acquaintance of the Utopia faction. Let's wait for him to come back." Wang Yunxiao waved his hand and turned back. In his heart, he muttered to himself, "Xiao Hua, this guy. When did he and the Utopia faction? Oh, he can't be a spy of the Utopia faction, right?" However, Wang Yunxiao shook his head immediately. If he is really a spy of the Utopia faction, there is no reason for him to be so careless. How could he swagger around to look for people? Maybe. Wang Yunxiao's face showed a trace of a rare hideous smile. Some people just think that they are clever. They think that swaggering around will not be suspected. Well, Xiao Hua is a disbanded cultivator. If he didn't have a great opportunity, how could he reach level 10 of the qi refining stage? This guy must have some secret on him. This secret must be related to the Utopia faction. After thinking about it, Wang Yunxiao could no longer sit still. He quickly walked out of the quiet room and chased after Xiao Hua in the direction that he had just gone. Xiao Hua asked the disciple on duty of the Taiqing sect and found the pavilion assigned by the Utopia faction very easily. Just as Dao Jing said, he couldn't enter the pavilion when he was about 3 feet in front of it. In front of the pavilion, there was also a disciple on duty of the Tai Ching sect. When he saw Xiaohua trying to enter, he walked over and said with his hands folded, "Senior brother, you can send a message or message in. If it is inconvenient, I can help you report it. May I know which senior brother of the Utopia faction you are looking for?" After thinking for a while, Xiaohua said with his hands folded, "I am Xiaohua, a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Please report to Senior Li Zongbao of the Utopia faction that I have something important to tell him." "Oh, you are looking for Senior Li, Senior Brother Xiao, please wait a moment." The disciple on duty turned around and went in. Not long after, Li Zongbao followed the disciple out of the pavilion with a surprised look on his face. When Li Zongbao saw Xiaohua, his face was even more incredulous. He looked up and down, left and right, up and down, and said curiously, "You are." Then he glanced at the disciple of the Tai Ching sect and said vaguely, "Are you the Xiaohua from before?" Xiaohua bowed and said, "I am Xiaohua. Greetings, Senior Li." Chapter 1603. Your cultivation level. Li Zongbao pointed at Xiaohua and asked in disbelief. Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the summoning glyph Li Zongbao gave him. He handed it over and said with a smile, "This is the summoning glyph Senior gave me that day. Senior, please take a look and see if it's real." Li Zongbao didn't take it and scanned it with his divine sense. He slowly nodded and said, "This summoning glyph is real. I also recognize your face, but, Senior, can you come in for a chat?" Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, "Junior has something very important to report to you." Li Zongbao nodded and opened the restriction with a magic tablet to let Xiaohua in. Xiaohua followed Li Zongbao into the quiet room. "Xiaohua, what happened to your cultivation level? How did you become a disciple of Imperial Thunder sect?" Li Zongbao had seen Xiaohua when he was in the first layer of qi refining, so he didn't believe that Xiaohua only cultivated from the first layer of qi refining to the 12th layer of qi refining in a few years. Junior was originally in the 10th layer of qi refining, but because of some things, my cultivation level was completely lost and I was seriously injured. Fortunately, Senior Heartwarming and Senior Xiaoyut saved Junior, so Junior temporarily took over Heartwarming's body. As for the specific details, forgive Junior for not being able to tell you the truth. Xiaohua explained in a low voice. Li Zongbao didn't know that Xiaohua didn't have any details to report, so he frowned slightly and said, "I don't care about those details. Which cultivation sect are you from?" Junior was a loose cultivator before, but now I've passed the disciple selection of Imperial Thunder sect and officially entered the sect. Xiaohua said. "A loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining." Li Zongbao's eyes narrowed. His sharp gaze was like two swords piercing Xiaohua's body, as if he wanted to see everything about Xiaohua. This is bad. Xiaohua knew it was bad. He was a loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining, how could he be so young? Moreover, he was always with Kaizhuxia, how could Li Zongbao not be suspicious? However, Xiaohua was also helpless. A loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining recovering his cultivation in a few years was more reliable than a loose cultivator in the first layer of qi refining cultivating to the 12th layer of qi refining in a few years, right? Xiaohua had to continue making this lie. Fortunately, a loose cultivator in the 10th layer of qi refining in the 10th layer of qi refining in the 10th layer of qi refining was around 20, and there weren't many people who knew Zhao's details' background. Seeing that Xiaohua's eyes didn't even blink as he responded to him, Li Zongbao continued to ask, "What about Kaizhuxia? Where is she now?" "Liang's." Xiaohua sighed with a gloomy expression. With a wave of his hand, he took out the silk pouch Kaijruxia gave him and handed it over. He said sorrowfully, "Fellow Daoist Kai asked Junior to give this to you." Hearing this, Li Zongbao's heart skipped a beat. He already had a premonition. With a wave of his hand, the silk bag flew out from Xiaohua's hand, but he didn't even look at it. He suddenly released his pressure, firmly suppressing Xiaohua. He coldly said, "Tell me, what happened to Kaijruxia?" His teeth s clack. S, seniors. F. His s's. Was, he, s. Senior. Ah. How is that possible? When Li Zongbao heard this grievous news, his face turned ferocious. His eyes were bloodshot. The mings increased. Senior. Withdraw your mings. Junior will tell the truth. Xiaohua didn't get angry when he saw Li Zongbao's grief. Instead, he sympathized with Li Zongbao. You. Li Zongbao stared at Xiaohua like a wild beast, causing goosebumps to appear on Xiaohua's back. After a long while, Li Zongbao withdrew more than half of his pressure, but still left some on Xiaohua's body to prevent Xiaohua from doing anything else. Li Zongbao sat cross-legged on the ground and said coldly, "Tell me." Xiaohua also slowly sat down and slowly said, "Yes, Junior came today to clearly explain the matter to Senior so that I can complete fellow Kai's request." After that, Xiaohua recounted what had happened in the flaming forest swamp, just like what he had told the Kai family of Liang. On the other side, Li Zongbao's expression changed drastically, especially when he heard Kaijruxia call out his name before she died. When she put the black hair into the silk pouch for him, he unconsciously opened the silk pouch. When he saw the black hair, he really thought of her and couldn't help but shed tears. The pressure that was suppressing Xiaohua had long been withdrawn completely. After Xiaohua finished speaking, the entire quiet room was deathly still. Neither of them wanted to say a single word. Li Zongbao's eyes were firmly fixed on the silk bag in his hand, as if he could see Kaijruxia, unwilling to leave even half an inch. After an unknown amount of time, Li Zongbao said in a low voice, "Xiaohua, is what you said true?" Xiaohua froze and hurriedly said, "How can Junior dare to deceive Senior?" Kai Daoyou's corpse was in the manor of the Kai family in Luoyang. Oh, Kaijruxia's younger sister, Fairy Hongxia, has already joined the Huanhua sect. She is currently in the Bright Realm. If Senior doesn't believe me, you can ask her face to face. It's just that, this disciple didn't tell them about Senior's matter. And I believe you. Li Zongbao said slowly, word by word, "How can I not believe a person who can send the last good fate tablet of the Huanhua sect back to the Kai family according to Zhuxia's wishes?" Xiaohua didn't feel any joy in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks for Senior's trust. All right, you can go now." Li Zongbao waved his hand, as if he had aged a few years. "I and Zhuxia owe you a huge favor. You and Kaijruxia." Xiaohua's heart ached as he thought to himself in amazement. However, he didn't dare to stay for long. He stood up and said, "Junior will return now. Junior will definitely not reveal the matter of Junior coming here, and Senior's matter." "Go," Li Zongbao sighed and waved his hand. After Xiaohua left, Li Zongbao's trembling hand held the silk bag. His eyelids trembled slightly, and scalding hot tears unconsciously flowed down. After an unknown period of time, Li Zongbao's figure didn't change. However, his hair gradually turned white, then white, and finally snow-white. Li Zongbao's eyes changed from pain to determination, and finally to indifference. When Li Zongbao's eyes became indifferent, his figure changed slightly. His hands formed a strange spell, and he placed them in front of his chest. His true core strength started to flow around his body. Along with the flow of his true core strength, Li Zongbao's body produced a huge suction force. It was like a black hole, sucking in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth both inside and outside the quiet room. The hurricane created by the flow of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth caused the restrictive spell in the quiet room to flicker. The movement in Li Zongbao's quiet room naturally attracted the attention of the Utmost Happiness faction's disciples. They didn't dare to neglect it and immediately notified the Taiqing sect's disciples who were on duty. They asked them to inform Xia Hui and the disciples on duty to release the restrictive spell in the pavilion so that more spiritual qi of heaven and earth could enter. The sky was getting brighter. Outside Li Zongbao's quiet room, more than 10 disciples were guarding it. Xia Hui also rushed back and looked at the restrictive spell in the quiet room nervously. He didn't dare to release his soul strength rashly. Inside the quiet room, Li Zongbao's hair was all white, and his face showed the usual indifference. Suddenly, Li Zongbao's face flushed red. Then, Li Zongbao opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of bright red blood. It landed on the silk bag that Li Zongbao had placed on the ground. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Li Zongbao's eyes moved slightly. He released the strange spell in his hands, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth that was violently sucked into his body stopped abruptly. Li Zongbao stood up and slowly opened his eyes. His pitch-black eyes gradually showed a trace of indifference. He raised his head and looked at the silk bag that was stained with blood. He raised his hand, and a wisp of flame appeared and fell on the silk bag. With a light bang, the silk bag was ignited and turned into ashes in a short while. Li Zongbao's eyes reflected the flame that was ignited by the silk bag. As the flame was extinguished, his eyes lost some of their emotions and became even more indifferent. Looking at the restrictive spells around the quiet room, Li Zongbao waved his hand. With a flash of light, the restrictive spells were closed. Outside the quiet room, Xia Hui was about to release his divine thought when the door opened. When the apprentices of the Utopia faction saw Li Zongbao's appearance, they couldn't help but be surprised. Even Xia Hui took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Zongbao, what's going on?" Li Zongbao said calmly, "Uncle, don't worry. Yesterday, an old friend of mine came to visit me. After he left, I felt that my understanding of the parting mirror had deepened. So, I took the opportunity to perform secluded meditation for a while. Last night's movement and my changes are all signs of my cultivation progress. Uncle, you've thoroughly understood the parting mirror." Xia Hui was delighted to hear that. Li Zongbao still said calmly, "I don't dare to say that I've comprehended it. I just felt more about it than before." Congratulations. It seems that I was right to ask you to come to the Feather Celestial Conference. Xia Hui said with a smile, "Although your cultivation hasn't reached the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, with the understanding of the parting mirror, you can easily reach the foundation establishment stage. Congratulations, Senior Li." The apprentices of the Utopia faction were also happy to hear that. They all bowed to him. "Forget it. Congratulations to you too." Li Zongbao waved his hand. There was no joy on his face. He looked at the sky outside and said, "Today is the day of the exchange meeting of the Feather Celestial Conference. You can go and find what you need. I want to meditate, cultivate, and consolidate my cultivation stage. Okay, you can go and wait. I will stay here to protect him." Xia Hui said with a smile and waved his hand. "Yes, we will do as you say." The apprentices bowed and left the pavilion of the Utopia faction in 2s and 3s. At this time, the sun was shining brightly outside the pavilion. Many apprentices were sitting on the ground with their legs crossed. In front of them were some things. The exchange meeting of the Feather Celestial Conference had begun. Chapter 1604. Xiaohua left Li Zongbao's quiet room and saw a flash of light at the door. The restriction was reactivated, and his heart ached for no reason. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will grow old. If the moon doesn't hate, the moon will be round. What can I do? Xiaohua sighed and left. The Taiching sect disciple on duty didn't stop him and only smiled and sent him off. Xiaohua's mind was in a mess. He didn't notice that in a dark place not far away, Wang Yunxiao was looking at his back with bright eyes, thinking about something. Xiaohua returned to the Imperial Thunder Sect's pavilion and opened the restriction of the quiet room. He was stunned. Inside the room, a crimson communication talisman was floating in the air. Could it be Fairy Hongxia? Xiaohua thought, and a trace of ecstasy appeared in his heart. Unfortunately, when he crushed the communication talisman, Sun Shu's voice came from inside. Junior brother Xiao, if you have time, can you come to I's quiet room for a chat? Sun Shu, what's the matter? Xiaohua thought for a moment, then turned and walked out of the quiet room. Sun Shu's quiet room was not far from Xiaohua's, and there was no restriction outside the quiet room. Hearing footsteps stop in front of his door, Sun Shu swept with his divine sense and got up to open the door. Junior brother Xiao, please come in. Xiaohua nodded slightly and walked into the room. Seeing Sun Shu activate the quiet room's restriction, he frowned. Sun Shu naturally noticed Xiaohua's expression and said in a low voice, I have some things to discuss with fellow Daoist, so I had to do this. Good. Xiaohua looked around, then sat cross-legged on the ground and said in a deep voice, then I am all ears. If it was a normal day, Xiaohua would definitely have a smile on his face and chat with the delicate and pretty senior sister Sun Shu. Unfortunately, his mood was driven away by Fairy Hongxia's indifference. Moreover, he just saw the sadness of Li Zongbao and Kaizhuxia. How could he still have the mood to chat with Sun Shu? His tone became much fainter. Sun Shu was sensitive and had long noticed it. He said with an apologetic expression, I know that junior brother Xiao painstakingly cultivates and doesn't waste any time. I'm really sorry for inviting junior brother Xiao over. It's fine, it's fine. Xiaohua reluctantly squeezed out a trace of a smile and said, I's mood is a bit bad. I hope that senior sister Sun will forgive me. People have their joys and sorrows, and the moon waxes and wanes. How can there be anything perfect in this world? It's normal for junior brother Xiao to have troubles. Sun Shu sighed and said, it's just that we're all cultivators. We shouldn't let our emotions affect our decisions. Junior brother Xiao, you're a loose cultivator, so I'm sure you have a deeper understanding of this. Perhaps. Xiaohua didn't understand why Sun Shu was so sentimental and casually waved his hand. Junior brother Xiao, I haven't thanked you for saving my life. Today, I finally know how to thank you. Please forgive me. Finished speaking, Sun Shu stood in front of Xiaohua and bowed gracefully. Xiaohua immediately jumped up from the ground, stretched out his hand to support Sun Shu's arm, and called out, What are you doing? Senior sister Sun, you've killed this little brother. How could Sun Shu be willing to comply? She still had to bow down, but unfortunately, how could her strength compare to Xiaohua's? Xiaohua's arm seemed to be cast from copper and iron, and it didn't budge in the slightest. Sun Shu couldn't help but muster her magic power, wanting to move Xiaohua's arm away. Who would have thought that even if she mustered 50% of her magic power, Xiaohua's arm still wouldn't budge? Sun Shu was a bit stunned. She knew the difference between the peak of qi refining stage and the early stage of qi refining stage. Sun Shu's beautiful eyes turned, and she bitterly smiled and said, Since junior brother Xiao doesn't want I to thank you, then I can only take it back. Don't, senior sister Sun. You also know that I's movement technique is very fast. Under the attack of the flying leopard, I might not necessarily be in trouble. That's why I dared to help. I don't deserve such a heavy reward. I reckon that the others also have the same idea. If they had the ability, they would have definitely helped. Xiaohua calmly said as he withdrew his hand. AI. Sun Shu sighed and casually sat down. She bitterly smiled and said, having the ability is one thing, but whether or not they can help is another. From I's point of view, they. Sun Shu waved her hand as if she was shooing away a fly. Don't say any more, don't say any more. Saying these things will only hurt I. Xiaohua slightly nodded and didn't say anything. After a while, Sun Shu opened her mouth again and said, actually, I invited junior brother Xiao over to discuss something with him. Please speak, senior sister. However, before I say it, I want to confirm something with junior brother Xiao. What is it? Xiaohua didn't understand. Junior brother Xiao has already learned the lightning escape technique. Sun Shu probed. This, what does it have to do with it? Xiaohua asked back. Sun Shu saw that Xiaohua didn't deny it and sighed in relief. She smiled and said, actually, when junior brother Xiao saved I that day, I already faintly felt that this was the case. However, to be on the safe side, I still have to ask. Seeing that Sun Shu had explained, Xiaohua couldn't deny it anymore and slightly nodded. That's good. A trace of a smile flashed on Sun Shu's face, and she asked, I wonder if fellow Daoist Xiao wants to cultivate the lightning escape technique to the 4th level. What do you mean? Xiaohua was stunned and said curiously, I naturally want to cultivate the lightning escape technique. Not just the 4th level, even if it's the 9th level, I also want to cultivate it. Hearing Xiaohua's answer, Sun Shu covered her mouth and said with a smile, Junior brother Xiao, was this lightning escape technique taught by your master? Why? Does senior sister feel that it isn't? Of course not. Sun Shu explained, if your master had no choice but to teach it, I believe that junior brother Xiao wouldn't answer like this right now. Why is that? Could it be that this lightning escape technique still has something fishy? Xiaohua was even more surprised. Sun Shu also did not ask where Xiaohua learned this lightning escape technique from. She only said, I wonder how many levels of the lightning escape technique junior brother Xiao has seen before. Senior sister Sun, if you have something to say, just say it directly. Always asking like this makes people very uncomfortable. Xiaohua turned his head and said. Alright, then I will get straight to the point. Sun Shu said with a smile, I believe that junior brother Xiao has only seen the 1st level of the lightning escape technique. Actually, although my Imperial Thunder Sex lightning escape technique is called an escape technique, it is actually a cultivation technique, which is the legendary lightning cultivator. Lightning cultivator. Xiaohua slightly frowned. He had never heard of this lightning cultivator. Sun Shu also did not explain and continued to say, it's just that because the cultivation technique is incomplete, this cultivation technique cannot be cultivated, and could only be modified into an escape technique. Compared to the previous lightning cultivator technique, the lightning escape technique can only be considered an insignificant Dao. Moreover, even so, this lightning escape technique is extremely different from the 5 elements escape technique. I believe that junior brother Xiao also knows that the lightning escape technique is divided into 9 levels, but you definitely don't know that this lightning escape technique is divided into 3 grades. 3 grades. Xiaohua was stunned. He seemed to have never seen this in the lightning escape technique before. I hope senior sister can enlighten me. This 3rd grade lightning escape technique is only known by the direct disciples of my Imperial Thunder sect, and it is only limited by word of mouth. Even your master, Maybe he only knows half of it. Sun Shu said with a smile, and shua, in the future, she will definitely not know. Therefore, I asked junior brother Xiao to swear that this matter absolutely cannot be told to anyone else. Xiao Hua understood. This third-grade lightning escape technique was already something that Sun Shu wanted to say in the future. It was probably her repayment for saving her life. Thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua nodded in agreement and made a hard oath. Thus, Sun Shu continued, the 3 grades of the lightning evasion are divided into high, middle, and low grades, respectively corresponding to the 9 levels of the lightning evasion. Among them, hibernating lightning, shocking lightning, and bright lightning are low-grade lightning evasion. Imperial lightning travel, imperial lightning change, and imperial lightning shock are middle-grade lightning evasion. Lightning travel 3 realms, lightning surpass 6 paths, and thunderclap 9th heaven are high-grade lightning evasion. And what's so strange about this? Xiao Hua secretly said, isn't it just the early, middle, and late stages? Actually, the low-grade lightning escape technique also has a name called lightning tranquility, middle-grade lightning escape technique is called lightning movement, and high-grade lightning escape technique is called lightning ascension. Sun Shu continued to say, the reason why there are these names is because there is an insurmountable gap between the third-grade lightning escape technique. There must be some opportunity to have the opportunity to enter the later stages. This opportunity is not just limited to cultivation. Looking at Xiao Hua's unmoved expression, Sun Shu said again, in my Imperial Thunder sect, there are countless disciples who cultivate the lightning escape technique. However, the vast majority of people stop at lightning tranquility. Very few disciples can break through to lightning movement. Even the current sect master is only at the 2nd level of lightning movement. What? Sect master, just cultivated to Imperial Thunder change. Hearing this news, Xiao Hua couldn't help but be shocked. That's right, it's exactly so. Moreover, not only that, my Imperial Thunder sect's reclusive elders and martial ancestors, it is said that at most, they have only reached shocking thunder change. Is it that difficult? Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. If it wasn't so difficult, why can everyone cultivate my Imperial Thunder sect's lightning escape technique? Sun Shu said with a smile, as long as you have a lightning attribute physique, you can comprehend my Lightning Palace's lightning escape technique when you reach foundation establishment. No one will stop you, because the elders in the sect know that it is basically impossible for them to break through to lightning tranquility. I wonder what realm martial ancestor Sun Ming is at. Xiao Hua suddenly asked. My master has already reached lightning tranquility's 3rd level. Sun Shu said with a smile. Bright lightning escape. Precisely. Xiao Hua's expression was thought-provoking. He said with a smile, since martial ancestor Sun Ming with his Aurus core stage cultivation can't break through to lightning movement, does senior sister Sun think that I can break through with my current cultivation? Sun Shu knew that Xiao Hua would ask this question, and said with confidence, if junior brother Xiao does as I say, perhaps there is a 30% chance. If you don't do it, I'm afraid there is only a 10% chance. Sun Shu then added, this humble Daoist saw that junior brother Xiao was able to comprehend the hibernating thunder escape technique at the late stage of qi refinement and has talent in the thunder escape technique. This humble Daoist wanted to work with junior brother Xiao because of that. Otherwise, even if junior brother Xiao saved this humble Daoist's life, this humble Daoist would only repay him in other ways. Chapter 1605. Cooperation. When Xiao Hua heard this, he couldn't help but have a headache. He had cooperated with Kaizhuxia before. Although he had also gained something, the price was also obvious. Senior Sun. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Senior Sun must know that I was originally a loose cultivator. I ran wild outside and didn't have time to cultivate. Now that I was able to enter the Imperial Thunder sect with great difficulty, I have techniques, pills, and the guidance of Master and Senior Sun. I really cherish the opportunity to cultivate now. Therefore, I'm not very interested in traveling and so on. I just want to cultivate quietly. Oh, I understand. Sun Shu didn't expect that the secret of the lightning escape technique couldn't move Xiaohua. Clearly, she had underestimated Xiaohua's hardships as a loose cultivator. However, since Junior Sun doesn't want to travel, why did you participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly? Sun Shu rolled her eyes and said with a smile. Is the Feather Immortal Assembly the same as traveling? Xiaohua asked back. I see. Sun Shu understood. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, it seems that Junior Sun doesn't know the origin of the Feather Immortal Assembly. Moreover, no wonder, when you saw I during the selection, you immediately admitted defeat. Junior Sun probably didn't plan to come to the Taiching sect at all, right? Indeed. Xiaohua said helplessly, I came here by coincidence. However, Sun Shu's face changed and she said solemnly, since Junior Sun didn't plan to come, then, don't come. Since you're here, then you must be alert and protect your life. What? Protect my life? Xiaohua was stunned and stuttered, I thought that it would be over after one round. The Myriad Thunder Valley hasn't had a disciple participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly for many years. Our Imperial Thunder sect always exaggerates the function of the Feather Immortal Assembly and never mentions the casualties. Yes, even if there are casualties, it's to win glory for our Imperial Thunder sect. After a long time, who would remember that the Feather Immortal Assembly was originally a method for cultivation countries to compete for resources? Sun Shu said coldly, even now, the Feather Immortal Assembly is a kind of experience for the late Qi refinement disciples of various sects to enter the foundation establishment stage. Since it's an experience, there should be a price. If there was no danger, if there was no risk of death, how could a late-stage aura refining disciple break through? What was the difference between this and the foundation establishment training once every 5 years? Of course, the Feather Immortal Gathering is different from the foundation establishment training that occurs once every 5 years. In the Feather Immortal Gathering, if your cultivation is sufficient and you're able to obtain a good ranking, then you'll be able to obtain the rewards of the Feather Immortal Gathering. The rewards may be a high-grade foundation establishment cultivation technique, a pill that can increase your chances of reaching foundation establishment, a powerful magic artifact, or even a magic treasure. Stay. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, Senior Sister Sun, what's the foundation establishment experiential learning that happens once every 5 years? This. Junior brother Xiao doesn't know. Sun Shu was surprised and laughed. Even if Master and Senior Martial Brother didn't mention it, the disciples of Zhenlei Palace would talk about it. Every time we train, there will be earth-shattering stories, and they are all topics that the disciples talk about in their free time. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Ever since he entered the Imperial Thunder sect, he had always been in the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden, cultivating behind closed doors. He didn't pay attention to the outside world, so how could he know about this? Master Wu Xian was a little impatient and wanted him to reach foundation establishment. He had more than enough motivation but didn't exert himself. As for Senior Martial Brother Xiangyang, he was the kind of person who would answer every question you asked about a cultivation technique and answer every question you asked about general knowledge. With such a master and Senior Martial Brother, how could Xiaohua know about this? Perhaps Wu Xian was also bewitched by the masters of the Imperial Thunder sect. He had long forgotten that the Feather Immortal Gathering was a 12th layer aura refining training to break through the barrier and step into foundation establishment. He only knew that it was a matter of gaining face for Genlei Palace and Myriad Thunder Valley, right? I'm a loose cultivator. It's not easy for me to find a stable place to cultivate, and I've always been in the Eastern Ridge. I even rarely go to Genlei Palace. Xiao Hua muttered. Sun Shu was close to Xue Xue, so she knew what Xiao Hua said was right. She nodded and said, cultivating peacefully can certainly improve your cultivation, but if you reach a bottleneck and can't improve, you can only go out to gain experience. When you reach the late stage of the 12th layer aura refining, the disciples of the Thunder Palace have to go out to gain experience once every 5 years. They hope to find a chance to break through the bottleneck and step into foundation establishment. So it's like that. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He had heard Xiang Yang talk about foundation establishment before, so he thought that foundation establishment was about the same as his cultivation of aura refining. He only needed to cultivate quietly. Now that he thought about it again, during the Feather Immortal Gathering's qualification selection, he had only gone through several hundred battles. Not only was he proficient in magic arts, but his magic power had also increased. It seemed that this kind of experience was also necessary. Sun Shu looked at Xiao Hua's expression and said, since fellow Xiao will go out to gain experience in the future, why don't you consider cooperating with I? This. Xiao Hua was a little tongue-tied. He touched his chin and thought for a while, then said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister Sun, don't you think that you can reach foundation establishment after passing the Feather Immortal Gathering this time? Sun Shu heard this and sighed. She smiled bitterly and said, I think about it even in my dreams. But, is it that easy to reach foundation establishment? Although I've heard that some disciples were able to reach foundation establishment when participating in the Feather Immortal Gathering, those are all legends. I don't dare to have extravagant hopes. Moreover, it's not just I. Apart from the disciples of the Heaven and Earth Thunder Palaces who may have some hope, the other 10 disciples are definitely impossible. Senior Martial Sister's words are a little too full. People like Wang Yunxiao, Min Gu, and Yuan Bo all entered the Imperial Thunder sect at the same time as I. They improved very quickly and stepped into the late stage of the 12th layer of aura refining in just a few years. If you say that they can't reach foundation establishment, I will be the first to not believe it. Junior Martial Brother Zhao's words are wrong. Sun Shu shook her head and said, foundation establishment isn't about who cultivates faster, but who cultivates to perfection. Moreover, apart from these, the most important thing is opportunity. Putting aside opportunity, Xue Xue also told I about these people that fellow Daoist Xiao mentioned. According to I's observations, it's precisely because these people cultivated too quickly after entering the Imperial Thunder sect that they became obstacles to their own foundation establishment. Not to mention that it's impossible to reach foundation establishment this time, even after 5 years, they may not be able to reach foundation establishment. Looking at Sun Shu's extremely certain tone, Xiao Hua was stunned. Senior Martial Sister, aren't you too arbitrary? Hee hee. Sun Shu chuckled and said, this is what Master said. I's just saying. Grandmaster Sun Ming seems to tell Senior Martial Sister everything. Xiao Hua said thoughtfully. This. Sun Shu's eyes turned a few times and she said with a smile, Master and I are somewhat related by blood. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. If there wasn't this relationship, how could Sun Shu know so much? How about it? Junior Martial Brother Xiao, I said so much. What do you think? Sun Shu said with a smile. Xiao Hua stroked his chin and slowly nodded. I know that this matter is related to Senior Martial Sister's cultivation plan, so I won't ask too much. When Senior Martial Sister feels that the time is right, if I happen to be going through Foundation Establishment experiential training, then how about I go with Senior Martial Sister? Great! Sun Shu clapped her hands and said, in that case, let's clap our hands and make an oath. When the time is right, I'll inform you. Xiaohua nodded. Thereupon, the two clapped their hands and made an oath. Soon after, Xiaohua got up. Just as he was about to leave, he inadvertently asked, "Senior Marshal Sister, why is there still a trade fair tomorrow?" It's nothing more than an exchange of things. Who would exchange things that are truly useful here? I'm afraid that what we'll see tomorrow will be some ordinary or strange things that other people can't understand. Sun Shu laughed. Though she said it carelessly, the listener did. Xiao Hua's heart stirred. There were still a dozen or so gold leaves that he hadn't found in the exquisite derivation pagoda. Maybe there would be some pleasant surprise tomorrow. Actually, after Sun Shu finished speaking, she looked like she wanted to say something but hesitated. Forget it, let's not talk about it. I've already said too much to Junior Marshal Brother Xiao today. If I had said it earlier, I would have been as annoying as my master. Then Senior Marshal Sister will talk about it later. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and left the quiet room. The night was silent. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly. The disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect and the other sects had already packed up their things and came to the plaza. Today's plaza was different from yesterday. The flat ground was divided into many squares. Each square was about 4 feet in radius, just enough for a cultivator to sit inside. When Xiao Hua stepped into the plaza, there were already many Tai Ching sect disciples sitting cross-legged. In front of them were some medicinal pills, jade slips, and other things. In addition to the squares occupied by the Tai Ching sect disciples, there were many empty squares on the flat ground. Some of the disciples of the other sects found a square and sat down. They put their things in front of them and waited for others to ask about the price. As the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect and the other sects entered, the plaza gradually became lively. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry. He just squinted his eyes and looked around. After looking for a moment, Xiao Hua gradually understood that it was just as Sun Shu said. There weren't any medicinal pills that were useful to Qi refinement stage disciples. Even the jade slips only recorded superficial Qi refinement stage cultivation methods. On the contrary, there were many strange little things. Some were strange in shape, and some had obscure spiritual power fluctuations. In short, they were mostly things that no one could afford to pick up. What is this? Xiao Hua was walking when he saw something similar to a necklace in a square not far away. This thing was iron gray in color. It was mottled with rust. It was really inconspicuous. Even the slight spiritual power fluctuations were intermittent. Xiao Hua didn't know the origin of this thing. It was just that when he looked at it, his first impression was that it had some origin. Xiao Hua took a few steps forward, wanting to take the necklace. However, when he was a few steps away from the necklace, an early-stage Foundation Establishment Tai Ching sect disciple stepped in front of Xiao Hua and picked up the necklace. He calmly transmitted his voice, "Fellow Daoist, do you want to exchange this for spirit stones or something else?" That disciple was from the Seven Skills sect. When he saw someone pick up the necklace, his face lit up with joy. He cupped his hands and sent a voice transmission to the early-stage Foundation Establishment Tai Ching sect disciple about what he wanted to exchange for. Chapter 1606. After that, the disciple of the Tai Ching sect also started to bargain. After a while, the disciple of the Tai Ching sect took out a storage bag and handed it to the disciple of the Qiqiao sect. The disciple of the Qiqiao sect opened it and looked at it. Then, he was delighted. He put away the storage bag and cupped his hands. "Thank you for your help, Senior. Please keep it well." "Okay." The disciple of the Tai Ching sect nodded slightly and put the necklace into the storage bag. Sound transmission. That's a good idea. Xiaohua, who was standing not far away, regretted that he was late. At the same time, he was lost in thought because he couldn't hear their conversation. Sound transmission was the basic spell of the Imperial Thunder sect. Under Xiang Yang's guidance, Xiaohua had mastered it a long time ago. However, he never thought that he would use it in such an occasion. When Xiaohua looked at the disciples who were exchanging items, he found that they were all using sound transmission. Moreover, they put everything in their storage bags and didn't take it out. Wonderful. Xiaohua applauded in his heart. At the same time, he dispelled the regret of not getting the magic weapon in advance. Then, Xiaohua walked forward again. However, at this moment, he heard some noises behind him. When he looked back, he saw 3 disciples of the Taiqing sect outside the square. They led 3 groups of disciples in different outfits and flew toward him. The disciples of the Taiqing sect whispered, "Humph, the Changbai sect, the Immortal Ascension School, and the Immortal Music sect are finally here. I thought that they would only come tomorrow when the Feather Immortal Assembly officially begins. Yes, I heard from my master that in the past, the cultivators of our country would arrive one day before the Feather Immortal Assembly. On one hand, they show respect to the host sect. On the other hand, they welcome the other sects from afar like the host sect." Xiaohua was amused. Yesterday, Sun Shu had said that the Feather Immortal Assembly was a trial for the disciples at the peak of the 12th level of the Qi refining realm. The disciples of each sect would fight for their lives. Who would want to come first? In Xiaohua's opinion, it was good enough that they could come. Meng country's 3 cultivation sects had around 60 people. They were also led to their own pavilions to rest. After Xiaohua walked around the square for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, these disciples also came out one after another. In the lattice, there were many new things that were taken out. Xiaohua looked at it for a long time, but still didn't gain anything. He saw a flat wine jug. According to the disciple who sold it, it was a spatial magic treasure, but without the method to refine it, it couldn't be used completely. That disciple wanted to use it to exchange for a water-based foundation establishment cultivation method. But through Xiaohua's spiritual sense, he didn't see anything special about this wine jug. He even felt that it was a very simple magic tool, similar to a storage pouch. Although there were quite a few disciples surrounding them, Xiaohua only listened for a moment before walking away. What was that? It seems to be similar to the soul-absorbing bell. He walked up to a Mongolian disciple who had just arrived and saw a broken bell. That Mongolian disciple was a young female cultivator. This cultivator's skin was extremely white, especially her 2 eyebrows, which were faint like 2 clouds. Xiaohua looked at the side and saw that there were no other disciples interested in this thing. He slowly walked in front of that female cultivator and cupped his hands. "I am Imperial Thunder Sect's Xiaohua. Greetings, senior. Sister." Pfft. When that female cultivator saw Xiaohua greet her and transmit his voice, she almost laughed out loud. Soon after, she transmitted her voice. "Fellow Daoist Xiao is interesting. We are just bartering, why do we need to introduce ourselves?" Xiaohua's face was slightly red. Just as he was about to explain, that female cultivator transmitted her voice again. "I am Immortal Music Sect's Zhong Xiaohan. I am very happy to meet fellow Daoist Xiao." Then she pointed her finger and said, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, are you interested in eyes things?" "Exactly. I don't know if fellow Daoist's thing is the soul-absorbing bell." This thing is called the soul-absorbing bell, but it is not the soul-absorbing bell that fellow Daoist spoke of." "Oh, so it's like that." Xiaohua was somewhat disappointed. He thought for a moment and asked, "I don't know if fellow Daoist Zhong has the method to use this soul-absorbing bell." Zhong Xiaohan stared at Xiaohua for a moment, seemingly thinking. Then she asked, I only wanted to use this soul-absorbing bell to exchange for some spirit stones. As for the method to use it, if I gave it to fellow Daoist Xiao, wouldn't fellow Daoist Xiao know the origin of this soul-absorbing bell? Xiaohua slightly nodded. Zhong Xiaohan's words were very reasonable. The method to use it must have the origin of this soul-absorbing bell. Looking at Zhong Xiaohan's meaning, this thing was most likely related to the state of Shi. When he thought of the state of Shi, Xiaohua naturally thought of the Qing clan. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, fellow Daoist Zhong, wouldn't it be fine if you erased the origin of the jade slip? Unfortunately, the cultivation method was not written in the jade slip. Zhong Xiaohan smiled. Xiaohua was helpless. He cupped his hands and said, it seems that I have no fate with this thing. Fellow Daoist Xiao, don't worry. Zhong Xiaohan said again, there is nothing in this world that can't be exchanged. It just depends on whether you are willing to pay the price. Great. Xiaohua clapped and said, what does fellow Daoist Zhong want? What does fellow Daoist Xiao have? Do you think it can be matched with Ai's soul-absorbing bell? Zhong Xiaohan asked back. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said with a smile, fellow Daoist Zhong just said that you want to exchange for spirit stones. It seems that spirit stones are not possible. Medicinal pills. I don't have any. If fellow Daoist Zhong wants any spirit herbs, I do have some here. You don't have any refining materials? Zhong Xiaohan frowned and asked. Refining materials. Xiaohua shook his head. Zhong Xiaohan said regretfully, I need a few golden silk fantasy stones. It seems that fellow Daoist Xiao doesn't have any. No. I have never heard of it. Xiaohua was also very regretful. He looked at the bell in the grid and said, I have a few old spirit herbs. If fellow Daoist Zhong needs them, we can exchange them. Otherwise, old spirit herbs. Zhong Xiaohan's eyes lit up and said with a smile, how old are they? Seeing that there was hope, Xiaohua asked again, how old does fellow Daoist Zhong need? 1,000-year-old exquisite grass, does fellow Daoist Xiao have it? Sigh, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air and said with a bitter smile, fellow Daoist Zhong really thinks too highly of me. 1,000-year-old, exquisite grass, how could I have it? Besides, fellow Daoist Zhong naturally has Immortal Music Sex Foundation Establishment Pill. Why do you still need exquisite grass? Didn't fellow Daoist Xiao want to know how old I need it? I already said it, why did you refuse? Zhong Xiaohan said with a smile, the more foundation establishment pills, the better. If I wait until I reach foundation establishment and find out that I don't have enough foundation establishment pills, don't you think I will regret it to death? Fellow Daoist Zhong is right. Xiaohua nodded, I have exquisite grass here, but it's only 600 years old. In fact, it was prepared to exchange for foundation establishment pills. However, I am still far from foundation establishment, so I will exchange it for fellow Daoist Zhong first. Ah. Really? It's really 600 years old. Zhong Xiaohan seemed to be surprised and said with pleasant surprise. She was so happy that she actually forgot to transmit her voice. A few disciples passing by also stopped and looked at the two of them in surprise. Sorry. Zhong Xiaohan realized that she forgot herself and said while covering her mouth, I wonder if fellow Daoist Xiao can let I take a look. Sure. Xiaohua took out a storage pouch and handed it over. As expected. Zhong Xiaohan opened it and looked, a satisfied smile appeared on her face. Seeing Zhong Xiaohan smile, Xiaohua's heart also felt at ease. He said with a smile, is fellow Daoist Zhong satisfied? Of course. Zhong Xiaohan also took out a storage pouch and handed it over with a smile. "Fellow Daoist Xiao, please take a look." When Xiaohua looked, there was indeed a book inside. After taking it out and roughly looking through it, Xiaohua unconsciously became happy. Just as he expected, this soul-collecting bell was indeed an ancestral artifact of a side branch of Shi country's Shao Nanqing clan. Good, Xiaohua raised his hand and put the broken bell into the storage pouch. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Many thanks, fellow Daoist Zhong. Farewell." "Hee, you're welcome." Zhong Xiaohan's eyes narrowed like two crescent moons, making her faint eyebrows even more tasteful. But just as Xiaohua turned around, Zhong Xiaohan suddenly asked, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, do you still have exquisite grass? I don't believe that you didn't leave some for yourself." "Hee, fellow Daoist Zhong, what do you think?" Xiaohua smiled and turned around to leave. After walking for a while, Xiaohua began to mutter. He had so many foundation establishment pills in his storage pouch, but he didn't think about the use of foundation establishment pills for these peak 12th-stage Qi refinement disciples. Who wouldn't want more foundation establishment pills? Thinking back to that year, Xiang Yang cultivated for 50 years because he didn't have enough foundation establishment pills. And the foundation establishment pills in each sect were presumably limited, so each disciple was given a fixed amount. If he used foundation establishment pills or exquisite grass to exchange for things with these disciples, most likely he would succeed, right? But immediately, Xiaohua denied it. This trade fair was exchanged with his real face. It was still possible to exchange for a magic artifact, but if he exchanged too much, he wouldn't be able to explain the origin of the exquisite grass, right? If this was known by the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples, it would be troublesome. Another disciple is here. Just as Xiaohua was pondering, the surrounding disciples whispered again. Sure enough, Shanghua Sect, Kunlun Sect, and Nanming Sect also came to the square under the lead of the Taiqing Sect disciples. Good, finally everyone is here. Xiaohua watched these disciples enter the pavilion, then put his attention on the things on the ground. However, there were many things in this square, and there were also many disciples who came to look for things they wanted. How could Xiaohua see them one by one? After walking for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he still didn't see any gold leaf. Xiaohua couldn't help but feel vexed. This Buddhist thing, why is it so hard to find? Before, when I didn't know, I could find it easily, but now I can't find even one. Could it be that the gold leaf is scattered in my country of Shi? Oh, right, how could this young master forget to use Buddhist awareness? It's not allowed to use divine awareness to search a large area. Even foundation establishment cultivators can't find Buddhist awareness, why not use it? Xiaohua slapped his forehead as he came to a realization. Then, he released his Buddhist awareness. However, just as his Buddhist awareness spread out for several meters, a similar Buddhist awareness swept over. Chapter 1607. It was the same Buddhist sense, but it was much stronger than Xiaohua's Buddhist sense. Xiaohua felt that this Buddhist sense was extremely viscous, like goat's milk. Compared to it, his Buddhist sense was like clear water. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked and quickly withdrew his Buddhist sense. However, it was already too late to withdraw at this time. That powerful Buddhist consciousness followed the withdrawal of Xiaohua's Buddhist consciousness and immediately locked onto Xiaohua. This is bad. Xiaohua hastily looked around, wanting to find a place to hide. He even wanted to fly away. However, there were many disciples participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly. Although it wasn't bustling, it was still very lively. Where could he find a place to hide? What should I do? Just as he was thinking, Xiaohua saw a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator in the distance. He was staring at him with bright eyes as he walked over unhurriedly. A late-stage foundation establishment cultivator? Xiaohua immediately gave up on the idea of escaping. If it was an early or middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator, Xiaohua might have been able to escape using the hibernating lightning escape. However, he was helpless against a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. The slowly approaching cultivator was tall and wore a light-colored Daoist robe. His hair was as white as snow and there was a light golden Daoist crown on his head. Looking at the cultivator's appearance, he had a red face and two thick black broom eyebrows. Under his eyebrows was a pair of eyes staring at Xiaohua, full of astonishment. When Xiaohua's eyes met with the cultivator's, he felt a sharp pain in his eyes. He couldn't help but look away as panic rose in his heart. The cultivator walked in front of Xiaohua and didn't stop. He transmitted his voice in a low voice, "Follow me." Xiaohua didn't dare to disobey. He could only lower his head and follow the cultivator into the crowd. The cultivator separated the crowd and walked towards the north side of the plaza. Occasionally, a few disciples would bow and greet him as martial uncle. When they reached the edge of the plaza, the cultivator transmitted his voice again, "Wait here for a moment. Later, look for me in this direction. I have something to ask you. Don't have any crooked thoughts. Since you've entered the Bright Realm, I can find you no matter what." "Yes, I understand." Xiaohua turned around and walked a few steps to the side, pretending to look at the things on the side. The cultivator didn't reply. He walked out of the square and entered the forest outside. After a short while, he disappeared without a trace. Xiaohua absent-mindedly looked at the silent bargaining of the people beside him for a while. Seeing that it was about time, he turned around and was about to leave when a very familiar, yet somewhat probing voice sounded from the side, "Xiaohua." Xiaohua stared blankly and looked over. He saw a cultivator with a storage bag in his hand staring at Xiaohua from the side of the grid. "Shuiqing Yuan. Senior Zhua." Xiaohua was stunned. In his heart, Shuiqing Yuan should have reached the foundation establishment realm a long time ago, and his cultivation should be the same as Li Zongbao's. So, how could he possibly appear in the Feather Immortal Assembly? But when Xiaohua looked at Shuiqing Yuan's cultivation, he immediately understood that Shuiqing Yuan was still at the peak of the 12th layer of qi refining. From the looks of it, Shuiqing Yuan had also come here in search of a fortuitous encounter that would allow him to enter the foundation establishment realm. "Senior Zhua." Xiaohua quickly walked a few steps forward and bowed, "Long time no see." "How are you, Senior Zhua?" Shuiqing Yuan put away the storage bag and said with a bitter smile, "I was blind. I didn't expect fellow Daoist Xiao to already be at the late stage of qi refining." "I wouldn't dare," Xiaohua hurriedly smiled apologetically. "I didn't deliberately hide it that day." Xiaohua still wanted to explain to Shuiqing Yuan, but the latter waved his hand and said with a smile, "Needless to say, who doesn't have secrets? I am not a curious person. Thank you for your understanding, Senior Zhua." Xiaohua said with a smile, "Senior Zhua is also here to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly, right?" "Haha, Junior Xiao, what are you asking? If I'm not here to participate in the Feather Immortal Assembly, then what am I doing here?" Shuiqing Yuan looked at the disciples walking past him and sighed. "You didn't see, the last time Junior Xiao came to my Xuanyan school, I was already at the 12th layer of qi refining. After all these years, Junior Xiao has already recovered his cultivation, but I am still at the late stage of the 12th layer of qi refining. If I didn't come to the Feather Immortal Assembly to look for an opportunity, what else could I be doing?" Xiaohua was sad. Of course, Shuiqing Yuan relied on the embryonic breathing pill to barely enter the 12th layer of qi refining. Foundation establishment was probably even more difficult. "Junior Xiao, which sect are you in now?" Shui Qingyuan looked at the Daoist robe Xiaohua was wearing and asked, "Why are you participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly when you're just at the early stage of qi refining?" "I was lucky enough to enter the Imperial Thunder sect, and I'm also participating in the Feather Immortal Assembly this time by chance," Xiaohua explained. Then, he looked left and right and said in a low voice, "I have some matters to attend to, so I'll pay a visit to Senior Zhuo when I return." "Okay, then go." Shui Qingyuan waved his hand. "That's right, Senior Zhuo, then." "Xiao Mao?" Xiaohua asked in a low voice, but his eyes were fixed on Shui Qingyuan's eyes, afraid that regret would appear in his eyes. "Oh, Junior Xiao." Shui Qingyuan said with a smile, "Junior Xiao has already come out of seclusion, and his life is in good condition." "That's great." Xiaohua felt a burst of joy in his heart, and Xiao Mao's sincere smiling face appeared in his mind. Shui Qingyuan looked left and right, then transmitted his voice, "Moreover, Junior Xiao's cultivation has improved greatly, and he's already at the 9th layer of qi refining." "Ah! 9th layer of qi refining." Xiaohua knew that Xiao Mao's explosive increase in cultivation was definitely due to the fire essence flame crystal, so it wasn't strange, but he still said with extreme shock, "Naturally, he's at the 9th layer of qi refining." Shui Qingyuan's face also revealed a joyful expression. "How many years has it been?" Junior Xiao broke through 5 layers of qi refining in one go. "I really don't dare to believe it." Shui Qingyuan chuckled, "Junior Xiao, if you don't believe me, you can come to my Xuanyan school to take a look. Junior Xiao probably really wants to see you." Xiaohua secretly curled his lips, "Xuanyan school. Good boy, if there's nothing, I won't walk right into a trap." Yet he said with a smile, of course, I'll definitely go when I's training." After Xiaohua finished speaking, he cupped his hands and walked towards the edge of the plaza, and similarly entered the forest. Xiaohua didn't dare to release his Buddhist sense. Sure enough, after walking forward for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, that cultivator was standing with his hands behind his back beside a stream. "What's your name? Which sect are you from?" That cultivator turned his head and transmitted his voice. "Disciple Xiaohua, from the Imperial Thunder sect of the state of Shi." Xiaohua didn't dare to conceal anything, and replied respectfully, "This relic of yours is a family heirloom. How many years have you practiced it?" "Disciple is a loose cultivator. This relic, disciple has fumbled, and practiced it for 20 years. That cultivator raised his brow and said with a smile, not bad, although you've practiced this relic incorrectly, to actually be able to practice Buddhist sense without anyone's guidance is indeed difficult for you." Practicing the relic incorrectly. Xiaohua stared blankly, "It seems. I've practiced it completely according to the exquisite palette scripture, without the slightest deviation. Senior, please give me some pointers, where did disciple practice incorrectly?" Xiaohua's eyes turned as he transmitted his voice. "Hee, this old man's cultivation method is different from yours, how can I give pointers? Moreover, this old man also practiced according to a secret manual of the Buddhist sect, I reckon it's only slightly more complete than yours." That cultivator said with a smile, "However, from my cultivation experience, Buddhist sense and divine sense are the same. This old man cultivated from qi refinement to foundation establishment, and my divine sense became increasingly dignified, so my Buddhist sense must be the same. Your Buddhist sense is as light as a feather, like a cool breeze, so naturally you've practiced it incorrectly. And, perhaps your cultivation method is of a low rank, so the relic you've refined is also lowly." Xiaohua smiled bitterly, disciple didn't know before, and always thought that the Buddhist sect's cultivation method was the same as the cultivation method. Only later did I gradually realize the difference, but it was already too late. You're also lucky to be able to come across a cultivation method left behind by the Buddhist sect, and even learn about the Buddhist sect. That cultivator sneered, "The most fortunate thing is that you actually weren't discovered by the masters of the cultivation sects." "What? Don't tell me." Xiaohua suddenly thought of a helpless expression, and of course he wanted to say something but hesitated. "There's nothing difficult about it," that cultivator said decisively. "As long as you were discovered, you absolutely wouldn't have any chance of survival." Is this serious?" Xiaohua's complexion changed dramatically. That cultivator raised his eyes to look into the distance and sneered, "The struggle between Buddhism and Taoism isn't just serious." "The struggle between Buddhism and Taoism? What do you mean?" Xiaohua was even more puzzled. That cultivator waved his hand, "Don't ask so much, this old man also doesn't know." If this old man hadn't occasionally flipped through these matters in the pile of old books in the Kunlun Palace and had a little understanding, I'm afraid I also wouldn't have known the crucial points. "That's right, I am Kunlun Sect's Hanju." "Greetings, Martial Uncle Hanju." Xiaohua bowed in greeting. "Do you know why this old man called you over?" Hanju nodded. Xiaohua shook his head, "This disciple is stupid, this disciple doesn't know. This disciple only knows it's because of Buddhist awareness. And this old man has always been looking for you, but after searching for almost 100 years, I finally found you, a cultivator who cultivated Buddhist awareness." "Yes," Xiaohua answered, and then he transmitted his voice, "Don't tell me it's very difficult to cultivate Sariras. I don't know if it was difficult or not when Buddhism was flourishing in the past. But now that Buddhism has already been exterminated, the cultivation methods left behind are all incomplete, even inferior to true cultivation methods. Wanting to use them to cultivate Buddhist awareness is simply as difficult as ascending to the heavens. No, it's even harder than cultivating to nascent soul." Xiaohua naturally understood. There were originally very few cultivators who cultivated Buddhism, and those who could condense Sariras and cultivate Buddhist awareness were naturally even fewer. There was nothing strange about this. "Don't tell me this cultivator wants to take this young master as a disciple. Pass on the Buddhist cultivation method he cultivates to this young master?" An unimaginable thought appeared in Xiaohua's mind. "Xiaohua, do you think spiritual force is better or Buddhist awareness is better?" Hanju suddenly asked. "Naturally, spiritual force is better." Xiaohua's eyes turned, and he smiled apologetically. Hanju also didn't find it strange, and he smiled. "Your Imperial Thunder sect has many methods to control spiritual force, so you naturally say spiritual force is better. If you obtain the method to control Buddhist awareness, you'll know. Many times, spiritual force is far inferior to Buddhist awareness." As he spoke, he reached out with his hand, took out a dazzling golden object, and threw it to Xiaohua, and transmitted his voice. "This is the method to control Buddhist awareness, take a look. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.